I don't know sign. No blind signs. How's that? Jim was telling me about it, you know? Very good.
We're ready? You good? Ah. Hey, let's get going.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, item 3.1 is amending section 2253A of the zoning map for Orem City to change the zone of approximately 4.4 acres from C3 to C2 zone located at 877 North State Street. This shows you where it is, and it shows you the zone currently. The pink is C3 and the red is C2. This is current zoning and the proposed zoning. The applicant would like the zone to be all one zone to make it easier to develop. It's harder when you have two zones. This is their concept plan. So you can see there's two on the State Street side, on the east side, there are two restaurants in addition to the car wash, which has already been approved. You saw this come in March, where you just approved lot 1 and lot 2, and now we're coming back to the concept plan for lot 2.
So lot 1's been approved, the site plan is not. Yes.
Thank you.
And this site plan has changed from last time.
The concept plan.
Yeah, you guys want more direction on what the concept actually is going to look like, who's there, answer that question. What has changed?
Yeah. So the concept plan shows an office building, which could be 2 stories, may or may not be 2 stories. And then it also shows a 2-story center for women and children in crisis. So I'm just going to read this so I get it correct. So this is short-term transitional housing. This is not permitted in the C3 zone. It is permitted use in the C2 zone. Another reason we want to change it to C2. And this Center for Women and Children in Crisis has a focus on being trauma-informed, victim-centered, and low barrier. The agency's goal is to facilitate healing and to advocate for victims with the intent to help decrease the incidence of such violence in the community in the future. Their services include a 24/7 hotline, a safe house for emergency short-term stays, transitional housing, temporary rental assistance, confidential victim advocates, 24/7 hospital response team advocates, victim educational support classes, therapy, and aftercare services that continue as individuals transition into permanent supportive housing around Utah County. So they really do a lot. So that's their concept plan. It shows what it looks like currently. And then they have a presentation which they will show in the main meeting. They won't show that here in this work session.
So the applicants are here and also the women in crisis folks are here too. If you have questions, they'll be here or they'll be presented.
Do you have any questions on this one?
Yeah, what happened to the hotels?
Yeah. Is Jeremy here? Oh, okay.
We had a hotel group that's interested. Timing of the hotels was an issue and how much time they need to get their deal done. We worked closely with Bill and Mary and feel really comfortable with the plan that they proposed. We're really excited about the opportunity to work with them. We were a little bit concerned about increased traffic, about the height of the hotels, among a few other issues. So the hotel group is still technically interested in the site, but we were running into issues of how much they could actually pay to make the site pencil. And also the other concerns I mentioned with height, with traffic, and we believe this use actually really benefits the property.
That wasn't a concern last time that was provided.
What was the concern?
The height of the traffic, that was not a concern. In fact, I vividly recall.
We had 2 hotels. Yeah, we had 2 hotels showing. If you remember, we said we're not exactly sure what's going to go back here. We presented a site plan that we thought was a possibility of going there, but we didn't know exactly what was going to be down there. But 2 hotel groups we were working with were extended stay. options, and they're a good use, but frankly, to justify the price of the land, they can't pay as much as rural.
But you still have somebody interested in downtown.
What was that?
You still have someone
We have
interested in
we have an
downtown.
extended stay operator that is interested. They need a very long due diligence to try to make their plan work. And we feel like the group that's gonna present today is the best and highest use for the project.
And is that a guarantee? It's a group that they move in? Is the women's center guaranteed to go in?
We have them under contract right now. And so the ball's in their court to work through their due diligence and to present here today, but they're committed to the site and we feel very comfortable forward. But we are under contract to sell it to them.
So they don't require the height restrictions of a C2. Why don't you just get a conditional permit to do women's center in C3?
So the use is not permitted in C3.
Right.
It's
Conditional use.
That's what you
the
could do.
question I have.
Conditional
Yeah,
use
that
instead
was-
of changing the zone.
We
No,
can
we
change
don't,
that.
we don't do conditional uses for that. It has to be something that's approved. You can't do a conditional use for a use that's not approved in the zone. They would have to change the
ordinance.
appendix A or SLU code to allow that in a C3 zone.
Is there some reason why it's not allowed in a C?
C3 zone is really limited to just basically offices and like medical, dental type uses.
Question
Grocery
probably
stores.
was, when it was created originally, was probably never intended that would be, wasn't thought of that would be a use. So C2 was the use, C3 is kind of limited in the city, so as we go through different uses and proposals, that's where we had over time. So it's probably just something that wasn't conceived at the time.
But it could be added if that was,
Could be,
could be,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's just like the palliative care stuff, right? Just-
So if the rezone, let's say the rezone didn't go, but they come back with a text amendment to allow this as a permitted use in the C3 zone, that's another option.
That was the
Yeah. Yeah, just something to add to that, with the two hotels, we were planning to come and ask for a rezone anyways because of the height restriction of C3. So either way, we were coming in to ask for a rezone to C2, whether it was their use or whether it was the hotels.
And the fact that half the property is C2 and half the property is C3 makes it really difficult.
How?
Well, if you have a lot that's half C2 and half C3, which are you? Can you put a building over that?
Well, the way we talked about it last time was the 3 lots on State Street would be one zone and the backside would be another zone. So it still have different.
So part of that zone is already zoned C2. so-
Yeah,
There is a
we
little-
combined it with the idea that they would be now two different, because they were gonna be built in two different sections.
A little bit of the
And we
property.
asked them to go replot and come back.
Right, and they did, but part of that is already zoned C2. So there would be part of that property that would be C2, part of it would be C3.
So that part,
It would just be a matter of
But the
meeting.
concept plans, they're all different lots anyway, right?
So there's 3 lots on the front and 1 large lot.
Yeah, so they'd all be different projects, really.
Yeah, 4 projects.
Yeah.
What else are
Maybe
we,
fine.
sorry,
Go ahead.
what else are we opening ourselves up for if we make the whole thing C2? What else could come in that wouldn't be allowed to come in a C3?
basically anything that's on State Street,
A lot of more retail.
Height and density.
retail,
There's no
Not really
density
density.
residential.
no.
So it's
Well,
really
I
just,
mean,
it's
just
just
you-
height.
How much you can put in the space versus,
You could put, well, the Pinehurst Plaza, which is west, is in a C3. So that type of development could go either zone. So those types of development, strip malls, those type of things are allowed in either zone. There's just certain uses that are not allowed in the C3. And that's really just based on the 2 different zones were created for different purposes, and it just wasn't anticipated at the time of all these different uses that could come. There is.
that's what I mean, with C2, you're allowing higher and more in the space
A
than you are
C3,
in C3.
C3 has a 150-foot setback limit before you can go up to that different height. Whereas C2 is limited based on the setback, and there is a cap on the height as well, which is 48 feet. So there are some differences in heights and different things, but not a whole lot of differences.
But they can be on top of the road compared to C3 on the backside, where they can't be the C3, they have a bigger setback.
Next to residential.
So love the idea of the woman's shelter, what's being proposed there. What other options do we have for rezoning? A PRD zone, you know, what are the other options for rezoning?
It would be either rezoning to C2 or changing the SLU code to allow it as a permitted use.
Those are really the only two options we have here.
If there's 3 acres, possibly could do a PD zone as well.
It's like 7.
You can't do a PD zone that's within the
7
500
total.
feet of State Street.
If it's non-residential, you could, but if it is residential, then you're right, you couldn't.
So, yeah, how you classify.
And would the women's shelter be considered residential?
Possibly.
Possibly.
I mean, that section that prohibits that could also potentially be amended as well to lift that restriction.
It's classified as a transitional treatment home.
If we rezoned it to C2 and the developer or something falls through with this agreement and something else comes through, what authority do we have? Yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
What authority do we have to prevent something else from being put on there?
It could be back to 2 hotels at any time.
Site plan will have to come back through for approval, but if it's a permitted use and they meet all the requirements, there's not.
Nothing there.
Yeah, because this is just concept plan, so
Same is true with C3. Anything that's
Doesn't-
permitted right now would be allowed. It was just a matter of meeting the requirements. So, they're both commercial zones, just have a little different height stipulations to look at and setbacks.
In the interest of time, let's move on to the other items. We can continue this conversation in the main meeting. I think we should.
Now, does the presentation has to happen? The women's shelter presentation,
They'll be there.
does it have to happen?
Have to happen.
I think the idea is great. Do we have to have the whole presentation?
No, you don't have to, no.
I think we should do
I
it.
think we
Figure out how to, right,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah, the
question.
applicants are here just to share what they're.
They're here tonight, but they can present. You're welcome to. Okay. Item 3.2.
3.2, design imaging, they are vacating 3 lots to create 1 large lot. They will demo 1 warehouse and build a larger warehouse. It's in the M2 zone on North Industrial Park Road. It shows where that's located. You can see they're taking those 3 lots and creating the 1 lot. This is a demolition plan for the existing, one of those lots has a building on it, the other 2 don't. So this is a demolition plan for that 1 warehouse. This shows the site plan for the new large warehouse. Final plat. Shows their landscaping plan. I was trying to do landscaping. This shows the elevations for the building. They have provided the required parking for the zone based on warehouse and office space. It shows what it looks like now. Any questions on this one?
How old is the current building that's there?
I don't know.
It's probably 60, 70 years old.
yeah,
Maybe not that old, but
It's
my first job was down the street.
And what is it being used for currently?
they're,
They're
Go
using,
ahead.
that design imaging, they also own buildings across the road, on the other side of the road, and they're using this one still as warehousing and storage.
the same.
But they just need a bigger one, they want to make a bigger one with more use.
So this will be used for their internal growth of their organization, is that right?
They'll receive shipments here instead of across the street as much, so.
Have a lot of raw material that comes in because they form shower things, different things, so.
Yeah, what does design imaging do? That was my next
You can
question.
ask the applicant for sure, but it has something to do with the shower forms. the,
Shower
you know,
surrounds.
these- They're custom shower forms, so I guess you tell them what you want, and they make it for you out of fiberglass. Or whatever they use. And what's his name? The applicant can give you more details. Any other questions on this one?
Item 3.3.
His name is Matt. All right, item 3.3, approving the Orem Center State Plaza subdivision. This is just across the street, State Street and Center. It shows that it is currently 2 lots. They want to change that for financial reasons into 5 lots. They're not changing any buildings, they're not changing footprints of anything. All it is lines on paper. They already have existing parking access agreements and easement agreements. Those will all stay the same. This shows a preliminary plat with the 5 different lots. Might be easier to see on this final plat. The McDonald's, and I believe it's the the bank, they already are separate, they're not part of the subdivision, so that's why,
The movement is as well. Where that is.
and you'll see lot one like 3 times, that's because they're different subdivision. So what it currently looks like now from Center Street. Any questions on this one?
Any concerns with the, what concerns did the city have for this?
No, they're not creating any new lots that don't already have a building. And all of the property is now with a reciprocity for parking. So it's all shared together. So, and those agreements are in place. So there really would be no issue with parking. Somebody parking over here and walking across there, it's all. So there really is no issue. They did originally come in and want to create a new pad site, which that would require them to come up to current standards, which they cannot do. So they would have had to come in for a parking reduction. So in the future, they may come back, but right now, they're not adding anything new. It's just a matter of property.
Before we start at, what? Before we start item 3.4, we do still have a presentation and they're here for it. So we're gonna cap the conversation right about the top of the hour. But we need to discuss it very thoroughly in the meeting and I intend to, but we just for preliminary information. Just so we all know that there's kind of a time limit on this. So item 3.4.
Want to take this one, Sam? Basically, item 3.4 is the transportation master plan. I don't know if you want to go through the whole presentation, just give them a recap.
Do we need?
You guys have any
I was-
I was gonna say, do we need a recap or do we just want to go into
We
questions?
can do the whole
Long list.
presentation.
Questions. Well, we can get done in the next 8 minutes. Go.
So I'm not a transportation expert, but I proposed some changes to the plan, to the executive summary and to section, I can't remember, 4.9. And was I reading, I didn't see any of those changes made, so I just wondered if I was reading the most recent version of it or not.
So I didn't incorporate any of those because mainly if that's something that you would like to see changed in it, that's what happens in this meeting is that you guys would say, hey, we would give recommendation, positive or negative with these changes, we bring it to the council, the council would be the one that does that. So that's why we're all here. If you guys wanted to discuss those, what needs to be added, modified, changed. we can
But
do it.
I think with the time allotted, we don't have enough time to go over it, to be honest.
Well, the time is really for the public hearing in November. So this is just more of an introduction of what's coming. Really, all your deep questions should be in that. meeting.
Yeah, we can, we got plenty of time out.
Yeah. I don't know if we have plenty of time, to be honest. What I've gone through, there's just a lot of things that
Do you have a bunch of questions?
a ton,
Good.
and I don't understand a lot. This seems to be built for other entities, not the city of Orem. It's really semi-destructive to our city, so that, you know, people coming in and out feel better at ease and have better traffic patterns. But it, you know, pounds through a lot of our neighborhoods for no reason other than to let Provo or Vineyard or Linden come in and have less of a wait time. I don't see the use for a lot of it. I have questions why we're upgrading a lot of things. Are they broken? So we're spending a lot of money on things just to be with the latest gadget. I don't believe in having the latest iPhone. If you've noticed, I still have an iPhone 6. So, and that's only because insurance paid for it. So, I do have a lot of questions about it. Just a lot of it doesn't seem to be beneficial to the city of Orem.
Question, how much of it is existing? I know there's a few little bullet points. I mean, how much changes have been made from what is already in the code to what is being proposed here? I know it's kind of a hard question, but is it?
There really isn't much that's changed. The biggest component is we removed the State Street districts out of our TAZs and some of the other planning and projects. And then with that also, there's also been a letter that was drafted, a cover letter that the Transportation Advisory Commission proposed, essentially kind of starting to embrace the fact that we can't build ourselves out of congestion. We should look at trying to, like, for example, Center Street, where the MAG RTP is saying, you know, according to the model, you should have a 7-lane facility here. The Transportation Advisory Commission is kind of the opinion, no, I think the maximum that we want to go is a 5-lane facility. And these are all of the projects that we've had from the previous TMP, and then looking at that, they also said because we're not willing to build ourselves out of congestion, because we all realize as soon as we spent $1 billion+ on I-15 here in Utah County, thinking that we would get 20 years, we're starting to reach that capacity sooner than later, because if it's wider, then more folks use it. So with that same philosophy, then maybe we need to look at our acceptable level of service should be a little bit lower. It's an E. So necessarily, a lot of projects, they might be pushed out to 10 or 20 years or further out, but realizing that maybe we're in our built out scenario. And that we're gonna stay where we are, where we have some spot improvements with intersections and things like that. So it really hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. The traffic impact study guidelines, the traffic calming toolbox we have in there, and those guidelines are all still the same. Really, the biggest component is going to be lowering our level of service from a D to an E, which means that we have more delay and more congestion on our roadways, delay being at the intersections. And those, what essentially it does is it changes that threshold to where, okay, hey, if we're coming in here and we're going to study it and we've collected the data, we're now at a level of service E. This is when we need to move forward with the project. Do you guys want us to go ahead and do that? Now this is what we've adopted, this plan and this guide to help us with that. But now we're going to go ahead and remove that from a D to an E, which allows for more congestion, more delay. And then maybe these projects get pushed out further and further. And the reality is, in most of this scenario where we're essentially built out, you may not have to do these. The 16th North piece, from 16th North east of State Street down along 8th East to 8th North. That whole area is built out. If we decide at some point in 10, 5, 15, however many years that the tech park is going to go into more of a density type scenario where there's housing there, maybe we want to widen it. But if we widen it, maybe we don't do it as we do right now, 16th North or portions of 8th East, where we bought one whole side of the roadway, we widened it to 5 lanes. Maybe we just do a symmetrical widening and we get about 30% of the capacity because we have friction. So it's really a guide and a tool. And speaking to last night too, in our council meeting, when we have a plan that is in harmony with the regional transportation plan, then we're eligible for federal funding to help us with these big projects. To go and widen a corridor is going to be $20, $30, $40 million. And that's something I don't think that we want to go ahead and try and do with our funding we have here, because we don't have those kind of dollars. So essentially it's a plan. We have a plan in place. If it comes to a point in time where it's like, you know what, Sam, can you guys do a study here? Because we're getting a lot of complaints. There's a lot of congestion. Our emergency response time is really poor. We need to do something here. Then that's when that starts the whole process. We do a study. If it's eligible, we go to MAG, we continue to get funding, and then we can do our project. So there's nothing in here that says, yes, we have to do all these projects tomorrow.
Okay, Jason, you have a question?
This is really interesting that you mentioned the tech center, then we can show you the move to density. What do you know about that?
I think we've had a developer come in, they've had some concepts. I haven't seen any personally, but I think they're looking at some options for that property. I think they're looking at about 7, how many units per acre is what that?
Sorry, where are we talking?
The
Tech park.
The tech park.
Between 7 and 10 units per acre.
So it's around the same as a PRD, probably similar to Da Vinci that's right next to the Happy Homes.
Yeah, it's not far from the village, it's not far from the property.
Right.
So, but that same owner, that REIT owner just hired a brokerage and marketing as we speak for high density housing multifamily. So
High density we talked to them would be 10 or less. They're not gonna get high density on that property.
I know they're not going to, I was just saying, that's what they're marketing right now with a broker is different than that developer I talked to.
They can market till they're blue in the face, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's all got to go through a process, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they can wish all they want, but there's reality.
So it's gonna be less than 10, I think.
Because that developer that came and talked about 7 per acre, he was kicked out of the negotiation for not paying enough as it could get a high density multifamily.
So the original development plan that we saw was just under 10 units per acre. And it was, there were some attached, some separate units, and some
Yeah,
rooms.
I have this one.
I mean, that's, I think, what the reality is.
Helen, do you have any questions, or do you want to wait? Can you wait till the meeting, or you're good? What do you want? I don't know, we just, need to move on, but I'm giving you an opportunity to speak if you want to say something right now.
Yeah, I mean, I have a concern. I felt like looking at this, it's a little bit like looking at a federal bill where there's so much in it that, you know, they've got an omnibus bill, thank you. There's some really good things in here. There's some things I'm concerned about. I'm just looking at the regional transportation plan and there are 8 things that they want accomplished in the next 7 years. I think at the very least, we should be individually talking about these. We should be discussing, you know, 1600 North. We should be discussing Geneva Road because everyone who's planned this so far is being paid to plan it. This is the front line for Orem citizens. And I'm not convinced that MAG really cares about Orem citizens. I understand that they're the ones with the big deep pockets. But I just want to make sure that each one of these steps is right for Orem. It's very hard to approve something thrown at us like this. My first inclination is like, oh, no. It's just, it's too big and too overwhelming. And I think there's some good things in here and I think there's some not good things in here. And how do we divide that out? Because we don't want to lose the good things, but we do want to seek out the things that aren't good for Orem.
So these are all just generated from a very large scale model, right? So there's nothing in here that's gonna bind us to when we have to do these. There's not a timeline. They're saying these are needed according to growth and projections, and it's data in that model. It takes a day or two to spit out the model because the model runs all the way from Brigham City to Payson. So essentially, we've identified these. Now, it would be a citizenry group like this, or even citizens just period that live in or said, hey, is there anything that we can do here? It's taking me forever to get through this light. The thing is that we go out and look at it and collect data and say, you know what, there is a lot of delay here. And I don't think that we have the funding to do it. That's when I would come to Ryan, to Brent, say, hey, we have a MAG tip cycle coming. We can go ahead and apply for some study money. We would ask for a couple $100,000, hire a consultant and actually study the intersection. And they can get into the details. We can collect data for multiple days and we can look at it and say, hey, is there a simple fix? Can we change some timing? Can we do some things to coordinate it better to allow us some growth? There are some opportunities to maybe not be delayed so long. But with that analysis, then we can actually come back and say, but the reality is this is only going to buy us maybe 5 or 6 years and we're going to be back in the same spot. So now's maybe a good time to say, let's start moving forward with the project. We would do like we did similarly with 16th North. I was involved with that and we actually developed 4 different scenarios, a no build, strip widening on each side to take, and then a widen to the north and a widen to the south. And we brought all the folks that live in that corridor and explained to them, this is the cost. If you do this, this is a much cheaper approach, but it's also going to provide you this, and this for levels of service. And we let them decide, do we want to do this now? Do we want to go one later? Do we want to kick the can down the road to when it's their kids? I mean, it really doesn't matter to me because you guys are the ones that are driving it. And that's how those projects happen. It's not as if I'm going to come in tomorrow and say, you know what, I got $30 million, we're going to move forward. That's not how it will work. These projects are going to be a little bit more or organically done, and we would have to do the study, get an idea of what we want for an alignment, and then we would have to slowly get right-of-way money. We have to do an environmental. I mean, we're talking, even if we were to do 16th North, even though the state is doing it, it's still, we'd probably be 5-6 years out if we were doing it ourselves. But we do that piece up front, get everyone involved, and we start moving forward with it. So I know it might seem scary.
Well, it's like a boulder rolling down a hill. You've
Right.
started the ball rolling,
Right.
so it's now harder to stop.
Much harder to stop. if
Because
we
you've
just
already
approve it.
bought property, knocked down some houses.
Well,
That's started to widen the corridor, so the ball's rolling. If we leave it on there, it just continues to.
Well, not really. I
Well,
think-
no, it
we need to
does.
move on.
If you look at it, we've identified those boulders, and which ones do we want to move is really what happens. It's not, because there's nothing moving yet. So.
We'll continue this in the other room, but we really need to move on so we can have our presentation to talk about the station area kickoff. Planned kickoff. There's an order for those words.
You can see it down 16. I lived there before there was a road. You know, they just encroached. It's because that ball been rolling down a hill for a long time. That's what happens when it's on the dice.
And that's not just the things.
South of the campus, yeah. It's the same thing we got here. There's one on Florida.
That's right now, right?
I think that's. This is 5 Lane Road. That's what you're talking about. I can see the I-15 bridge, which is the one. So that's Geneva Road to the. Putting 5 lanes corridor like that, so Geneva Road. On the other south, because they want to put an overpass.
Literally nothing works once you get right there. So it's not.
We checked everything, like.
There we go, it worked.
That's already drawn, so continuing on with that University Parkway, through Provo, they would widen Provo, so destroy Provo from our areas, and then continue it on State Street, used to be that corridor. But the way Provo developed, kind of becomes a dead end, so that now there's a long way to get going, University Parkway, Spring, down into so they'll just create another, like they did with
Either just decided to turn off.
I think it's horrendous to break them. Yeah, I do too. But there's some things in here like these two overpasses. What job is that? It impacts the neighborhoods.
Which overpasses?
Major neighborhood. You got one on the south. So the overpass would actually hit because when we talk about 3 lots, they would be right next to the because that's where it comes. Well, that's why I don't like to. And you can see the empty lots for property that's already been bought. Why try?
We try, I know, we try to give her all the time.
Well, we should.
Oh, progress.
All right, we're in business. I can get it to, there we go, maybe. All right. Sorry about that. You guys have a hard stop. You're over there at 4:30, yes? Okay.
We need a couple of minutes to transition then.
Okay, we'll be a little speedy and I'll ask you right now to get your phones out because we're gonna do a little polling. So it'll be in a couple minutes, but I'll give you the nutshell of the process and project first. My name is Christy Ostema and I'm with People in Place. And Jake Young and John Jansen are back there as well. And we're working with your city on the Orem Station Area Plan. So just a little bit about what that is. In terms of overall objectives, they come from House Bill 462. And it's the goals of that objective of the bill is to maximize development potential in appropriate areas. We'll talk about what those areas are. The approach is cool in that the idea is that the cities are in the driver's seat in terms of what you'd like to do. Cities determine how best to meet shared objectives without the state mandating a specific approach. So what are those objectives? And I think we can relate to a lot of these. Increasing the availability and affordability of housing, right? Housing crisis in our state. Promote sustainable environmental conditions, enhance access to opportunities like education, groceries, basic things, increase transportation choices and connections. In terms of requirements, cities with front runner tracks or streetcar stations need to do a station area plan within a half-a-mile radius around those stations. So that's what this process concerns today. BRT stations need to do that as well. That's down the road for Orem. In terms of what's required for a station area plan, there are basically 5 things. We'll be working toward a vision together. We'll be looking at a map, creating a map for the station area. And then once that map is created and we've got a vision coalesced as a community, getting together and figuring out a 5-year implementation plan. And because we're also doing a vision looking out several years, we'll be looking beyond that too in terms of implementation. And then we need to provide a statement that identifies how we're promoting the 4 shared objectives that I went over a moment ago. And then what I think is great is a commitment to doing a lot of public involvement and stakeholder engagement. So really hearing from Orem residents, business owners, citizens, you guys who are here every day, to understand from you what you think the potential is for the station area plan. We'll then take the plan and seek certification from Land Association of Governments. That will be included in the City Monitored Income Housing Report and submitted to the Department of Workforce Services. That's kind of the process. In terms of the state, there was technical assistance provided to these station areas. Orem was awarded $150,000 for this particular project. And then we go through the certification process on the MPO side. And that's certifying your station area plan, and it's with a committee of fellow mayors and citizen leaders. So a couple of examples. You want to talk through these really quickly?
Yeah, so this is the American Forest Station, and this was done before the bill was created, but they're both Patriot Station. What's different is that it's a greenfield development. Their focus is on mixed use, walkable, and it's also a CRA in American Forest, so certainly a lot of economics behind it. The Vineyard Station, as you know, they're building right away, they're building roads, and they do have a new train station, which was operating last year. And they had the promenade, which goes from the station out. So and John and I did the original zone, you know, for Vineyard on this. And it's had a couple of code changes since then, but it's really towards building.
A couple more in Vineyard, yeah.
How are these coming along? Are they been now implemented? I'm seeing the what's.
Yeah, the roads are going in. They're building at Main Street. They have what they call a square about, the track out, which is kind of like a roundabout, but a bit more rectangular. And I think they're starting construction on buildings soon. You have the corporation, you know, with Flagship, and the two together are starting.
Yeah.
The American Forest Stations, there's probably thousands of units out there already.
Oh,
Yeah, my brother or my son lives out there, so I'm very familiar with that one.
great.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see what the neighbors are up to, and we'll keep tabs on that as this process goes forward. We also bring that up because it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of all of the jewels on a necklace, right? What's Orem's specific role? How do you see yourselves in terms of the region? And what kind of place would you like to create at your station for your residents? So this is the Orem station area plan. It's our station area is half-a-mile radius from that little red dot right there. So you can see that UVU, both on the east side and the west side, takes about a quarter of the land. You see the 3 major apartment complexes here. There's a warehouse, some single family to the north, and then the industrial and business park. So quite a mix of uses. Lots and lots of parking directly by the station itself. So we get to think through this area in this process. So in terms of current conditions, we'll be thinking about what's working, what's not working. What do you hope to see more of, less of? What are the big questions that we need to answer in this process? What major challenges are there? What major opportunities? So with that, this is, I know, a very quick session, but go ahead and scan this code on your phone. I'll give you a second to do that. And we're going to just get some first impressions on some of those questions.
Closer.
Got a few commissioners that have done this before. All right, everybody scanned it?
I have to get it back.
No, you don't. All right, here's your question. Current conditions, what's working? One brief phrase. So starting to pop up here, BRT, the connection to UVU, it's working for UVU. Front runner. High density development on the west side of I-15. We wondered about that, if that takes the pressure off single family neighborhoods on the other side of Orem. UVU Orem relationship, housing next to transit, BRT. Okay. We'll keep moving. What's not working? Next, I'm not sure what that means. Next question. Needs more parking. Threat to existing family neighborhoods from UVU project. So something's not not a good neighbor, maybe. Difficult to travel through the area. Got lots of north-south regional arteries, really disconnects the space. Pedestrian access, parking, lots of surface parking underused. Access over I-15 other than University Parkway. Yeah. Yeah, so lots of things to start considering in this process. Underused large parking. Yeah, 50% of the site is some sort of pavement, concrete, asphalt, whether for parking, roadways.
Does that include both sides?
I'm sorry, the direct station area. Yeah. Yep. I'll show you a map of that in a stakeholder meeting later on. What do you want to see more of? When you think of, we've got over 25 years we're looking at. So we can look out a long time. You think of what the needs of Orem citizens might be by then, of the region. What would you like to see more of in a site like this? It's really an opportunity to think big. We're not looking just 5 years out. We're looking out a couple of decades. Businesses, recreation. You're awfully close to Utah Lake and the planned regional trail. Yeah, station development. Housing. I'm riding the train, some food options. Open space. No public parks in the area. Mixed use, resident amenities, restaurants. Okay, so people are living there, stuff for them to do. A zoo. Green space. Cooperation between UVU and neighbors on future development. Okay. Yeah, UVU's the big partner there. All right, let's transition to the flip side. What do you want to see less of? It's 2050. What do you hope not to see there or to see less of there? high density housing, warehouses, surface parking, high density, cars, asphalt, urbanization, transition of courtesy neighborhoods to high density, okay. Well, it's helpful to just kind of start to get a sense of what you're thinking about in that area. And could we take just 5 minutes? Okay, yeah. So as you think about that area, I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with it, but what kinds of larger questions or challenges or opportunities do you see? And this is not on your phone, this is just typing.
It's mostly challenges because I think the state UBU has different goals or objectives than the neighbors do. We are just in opposite places. And so, you know, my big picture question is how do we get on the same page?
Okay.
Is layers, in the sense that just not aware of what's happening, what's going on. We have it on that neighborhood, that has permanent existing residents, the amount of overflow, and I can attest the amount of tickets people get there, and it's not even developed the way you want it to be. That's just an existing issue. And as far as the parking that sits underutilized, I don't know what you're talking about. Budding's access. And it's because of them having those problems. And they're excited about probably. So there's just where we live towards the city's property, and it never lines up. It decides to happen here on it. And I think it's quite see people are skittish of answering these type of questions. You don't know the answer when you meet somebody from the city, like to see the improvement of what the progression you want to do, or some citizens that are just the last created by thousand more questions.
Yeah, yeah, lots of competing interests.
And all this data cases, exercise was very well. The collaboration seems like a good idea, but that's not really it.
Okay, lack of trust in that collaboration.
What about results? We did speak of the parking spot issues, and there's collaboration here. We'll make sure we have enough. And there we go. We have enough citizens getting their home house, getting the parking permits.
Yeah. Okay.
Collaboration. So
on the opportunities side.
Can I make a quick comment about on what Jason said? I was at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, and what I noticed is the majority of the people in that room were being paid by an organization to push a certain plan. And I think you had 4 Orem residents in there that were simply giving up their time to look after their city. And what Jason said, it felt very unbalanced. There was MAG, there was UDOT, there was UBU, there were all these other organizations that had a vested interest in that land. And a paycheck. And I feel like there should be more Orem citizens on that if you really want to try and get more raise another holder running down until the Orem residents aren't gonna be able to stop.
Gotcha. So I think, I know the city's working to try to get more residents involved, and we anticipate having more there at the next meeting. The other piece is, we're committed to listening and learning from the public at these public meetings. And the stakeholder group is not being asked to present their own opinions as much as to make sure that we're hearing the public. And that what we hear from the public is what arrives in these plans. So we are really watching that. Yeah. We're out of time, yeah, it is challenging.
Yeah.
So you're probably sensing, And
Yeah.
what fundamentally makes this piece of property really, really difficult is it's like, it's great to look at vineyards and it's great to look at American Fork. But they literally had land
There was greenfield.
and we are built out, we have tons of stuff, as you're saying, it's a very contested area because of all of the different layers.
Sure.
It's an extreme challenge.
As a citizen venue at the station, you know, signs that say residents across the street cannot park at the station. They literally park all the way to the station and now the city video has to tow them. And that's before you just follow the note. So I can.
That's pretty sad for a fledgling city to be that cramped.
But
Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion, because we need a.
We can move on. Yeah, we're gonna look forward to meeting back with you guys intermittently and really look forward to continued participation on behalf of the planning commission and the public.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we'll adjourn to the other room.
This is really open.
That's why I don't like this. Just depends on who's
Thank you. I started carrying it back so that I could stick everything in it.
and there's also fire.
just always any ones that fire.
I know. I'm sure I am.
But you build them out to begin with.
Yeah.
That's why you're really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what, I understand your nature thing, but there's some other things with glacier life.
Let's do this.
Just take it down or whatever. Unfortunately, we joke with the first one. And I like to help everybody. It's just what you called me again today. It was just kind of like bad time. I've been on the phone with Dave Young, Dave Spencer, I mean, it's like.
Who's with the women and children, do you know?
Hi, Cheryl, how are you? I'm Rick.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you.
You could tell maybe with Mylar Heaven. Yeah, and I did. Okay, great. So you'll know which one. This is the one. So, what you're doing first. Literally.
So I have the presentation.
That's not me. I'm just. You're right. Thanks for all your help.
What? Testing. Oh, so are you gonna do, I have the slides, are you gonna be going through those? Okay, so you can just come up there, I'll just move my computer over and you can do that how you look. That work? I won't go into any detail about that, what you do all that. Testing. Just kidding, just kidding.
Are we ready?
Sorry.
Okay, then I call this planning commission meeting to order and we will have an invocation by Murray.
Thanks. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the opportunity we have to talk about Orem's future. And we're grateful for this great city, this great state, and this great country for the freedoms and blessings we enjoy, and pray that they may be preserved. We pray thy spirit to be with us in this meeting. Help us to be cooperative and inquisitive and to look for common ground and do that which should be for the greater good of Orem. And please bless us that we will be able to communicate in such a way that can happen in the most effective way possible. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
We'll start with item 3.1.
All right, item 3.1 is amending the zoning map of Orem City to rezone 4.4 acres from the C3 zone to the C2 zone. This is a location, it's approximately 877 North State Street in Orem. And you'll recognize this because this came through in March and lot 1 was carved out of this and rezoned to C2. So this is coming back to do the rest of it. This is what it currently is zoned. You can see lot 2 is both part C2 and C3. This is what the proposed zoning would look like. And this is their concept plan. You can see that they'll be on the State Street side or the east side. In addition to the existing car wash, which was previously approved, there'll be 2 restaurants with drive-throughs. And then on the west side is an office building, which could be up to 2 stories, and also a women and children in crisis center. This is considered a transitional treatment home, which is not currently permitted in the C3 zone, but it is a permitted use in the C2 zone. And I won't go into much detail about that as they are here and they will do a presentation. This shows what the looks like from the street side. And then if they want to come up, they can tell us about the Women and Children in Crisis Center.
The applicant can come forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Paul Washburn. I'm here representing the Women and Children in Crisis Center, and Kaylee is also here, and she's going to talk through this slideshow with you.
My name is Ashley Taylor.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
the
sorry.
executive, that's okay. I'm the executive director for the Center for Women and Children in Crisis. We're also known as the Refuge Utah. So who we serve victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in Utah, Juab, and Wasatch counties. 51% of who we serve are females between the age of 19 and 33. And 45% of those that stay in our safe house are from the Provo Orem area. Unfortunately, domestic abuse in the past few years has increased dramatically. And in fact, it has over doubled in Utah County just in the last 3 years alone. It's estimated that law enforcement victim advocates are working with over 4,000 victims of domestic abuse each year. And that's just in Utah County. Our current shelter, we have 25 beds, and this is for emergency shelter. And that shelter has remained the same for over 25 years. And obviously the population in Utah County has grown well beyond that. Just last year alone, we had 480 individuals that we had to turn away just because our facilities were full. Now we're able to safety plan with them, get them to other safe, stable housing, but our services, we were not able to provide them shelter in our services. In 2021, they did a point in time count and showed that 26.8%, which is the leading cause of homelessness in Utah County, was due to domestic abuse. And that's something that we want to solve. Here are some concepts of what this could look like. We want to make sure that it matches the area, that it fits in, and then it serves the need of those that are staying at our safe house. So currently with our 25 beds, we're able to house 94 females and 116 children. The average stay is 28 days, with some being longer, just depending on their situation, and some only being a few days. Last year, we served 1,575 victims of domestic abuse and sexual assault. And we know that there are many more that are needing our services, that we need the capacity to be able to help. And we received nearly 3,000 calls to our 24/7 hotlines for help. That's all.
Thank you. Just like to add a few things if I could. We have been looking for a new location for a period of time, and we have some very special requirements. We need to have places where people can get to and from by bus. Also, the people that are staying there short term typically are pedestrians. This location is really good for us because across the street we have the grocery store. Within Pinehurst, the development directly to the west, we have dentists, we have doctors, we have fast food, we've got banking, everything is there within walking distance. The site itself, it's surrounded on, I guess, 3 sides by commercial. And your first thought is, well, maybe that's not a safe place to be, but it really is. All of the surrounding businesses have security cameras. We will have security cameras. Our facility will be fenced and gated, and people will be allowed in and out based on knowing a code or being punched in or out by staff. This is a great location for us, and we'd like to be able to move forward with it. Our intention is to build the housing portion first, and we'll use a portion of that for office space until we can dispose some of the additional property we have and be able to build the office building. Majority of our cases, it's counseling. A lot of people can be released, come in and go out in a couple of days once they are able to contact family or friends. We do have people that need a little bit longer term, but never more than 30 days. And I think you said 28. So
Yeah, that is the average.
Anyway, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this portion? No? Okay,
No.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Why would we question it? It's amazing.
It is.
Close. My only question, where's the other facilities? Is it down Provo or?
Yeah, currently our shelter facility is in Provo, and we
Okay.
have an office building that's separate in Orem.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Did you have any other questions for staff?
So like we discussed earlier, there's no concrete way to force that this is the only thing that goes in there if we change the zoning. So I'm concerned, we've seen this plan change a couple times already. So we rezone it and then all of a sudden we get 2 high-rise hotels back in place.
So it's like,
So there's no legal way to force, if you don't build this, then we go back to C3, correct?
correct. And if it's zoned C2, which is what is already along State Street. So anything allowed in that zone is already close to C2 anyway, backs up to it. So anything that's allowed in the C2 zone would be allowed here.
Right,
We can't 100% guarantee that this will go in.
right.
And just to add some light into what I was saying earlier about the hotels, the original concept plan we showed showing 2 hotels was just because we needed a concept plan to get through the preliminary rezone. We're not currently talking to any more hotel groups. Would they be interested? To answer that earlier question, maybe. If they went away and we went back out, I guess there's a possibility, but we're not currently engaged or talking to anybody else and they're under contract to buy it. So we currently are not entertaining a backup offer to a hotel group or anything else. And without the rezone, they can't move forward anyways, but we're not hoping to get the rezone to have them go away and then put in a hotel at this point.
Yeah, I like the concept and I like the usage a lot. I think it's a great use. I'm just concerned that the zoning, the impact to the surrounding areas, the traffic, if this plan doesn't go through, I'd be more apt to support something we did with palliative care in another zone to make this happen personally.
Can we do a conditional use permit in a C2 for in a C3 for this? I mean, can we allow for this to happen on this site? Because this is a perfect, in my mind, we couldn't have a better use of this site.
So
It's great.
Sounds like the direction that I'm hearing is that it would be better probably to add that this is a use in a C3 zone and leave it C3. So that you would just add that one
I'd
use.
be more comfortable with that. I can't speak for any.
That's not the application before you. They would, we'd obviously have to come back with that, but that's the alternative if you're not comfortable rezoning that property to C2.
Yeah, I just want to make it explicitly clear that we're in favor of the women's shelter. That's not an issue. If that's what you want to do and that's where this is the space where it'll work for you the best.
Yep.
That's not an issue. We'll do whatever we need to add language, change language, do SLU, whatever we need to do to get you in there, that will happen. So what I want also want to make sure it's clear that this is a very heartfelt project, but that I don't think that will affect the way how we think about the zone. So we're just going to continue the questions from there.
Yeah. No, yeah, in agreement. Would you like to respond?
I keep hearing that there's a concern that we're going to move ahead with this, get the zoning, then we're going to bail out and do something else. We spent years trying to find a location. The only thing that's going to stop us from going here is not having an appropriate zone that will allow us to be here.
We're not
committed to
in
it.
disagreement on that at all.
Excuse me?
We're not in any disagreement with you. The women's shelter, given that the deal goes through, will go there no matter what. So there's not an issue for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
the biggest concern is changing the zoning on this particular lot and the long-term implications. Because we still have to think in terms of what happens in 5, 10, 15 years and what will it be? And that's where, and I mean, speaking for myself, but maybe for everyone, that's continues to be what the concern is.
And just to add to that, I mean, obviously their intent is to make this deal happen because it matches the zoning of everything else around on State Street. Is there, what's the concern about it being C2 because it matches everything else and because it doesn't back up against a bunch of residential homes, because it backs up against multifamily? Is there, what's the specific concern, I guess, about the?
But it isn't just multifamily homes. There are residential homes literally right there.
Well,
people from that, you know what I mean? People from that neighborhood walk in and out of there all the time.
That
And so
neighbor's heavily impacted by
it.
what's there
So
already.
So, and apartments, people live there too. I mean, and then, yes, they know they're along State Street and we can get into that whole argument, but I think the concern is the back portion of the property. I don't think anyone's questioning the C2 for the restaurant or the C2 for the whatever's going in
Retail
along
pads.
State Street. It's just, the idea historically was that this would be a buffer into the neighborhoods for what kind of could go in there. And if we open that up, we're literally opening it up to anything being able to go in there.
Could I ask a question?
Jason would like to respond. And
So
then,
just
yes.
another option, which we've done in the past is, but that would be up to the applicants to propose, is the development agreement. If the council decided, ultimately the city council decided to rezone it to C2, they could proffer a development agreement that would limit the use to this particular use. So that in the event in the future, they decided to go somewhere else and something else come in, they would have to come in and negotiate the development agreement again with the city council on what other uses in the C2 zone would be allowed. So that would limit it to this specific use, but that's something the city's not going to require. That's something the developer could, if that's interesting to the council or planning commission, to make a recommendation that if you want to move forward with that a development agreement be
Put in place.
So we could recommend that today, basically,
But-
do this with the development agreement as a condition of that
Yeah.
moving forward.
not a condition,
Saying-
but something that if the applicant would agree to
has
do.
apply for it.
Yeah, the city can't require that, but they could proffer a development agreement that go along with it to limit their uses, basically.
One thing to note is if we go adding it to C2, I think this is a worthwhile endeavor. We open up a lot more spaces that they could utilize within the city for additional spots if
Are you saying
needed
if we
to grow.
move, if we add it to
we add
C3?
to C2 or C3,
C3, okay.
yes. So we open up more spaces for them to develop.
For
too
more
as well.
women's shelter.
Yeah.
Well, we just did this at our last meeting. We just added to the zone for the go-karts.
Correct.
Could you help the applicant know? Because we all sound like we're on the same page here and that we would like to approve them in the current zone. What would the applicant need to do so that they could move quickly to ask us to add this to the zone and this could continue?
So we would need to continue this item and then they would make application for the SLU code change and then we'd go through that process to get it back as quick as we could. But as far as there is some portions of this property with their new concept plan that need to be zoned to C2, because you guys mentioned that the front portion, there's still a sliver of property that needs to be zoned.
Yeah.
So that still needs to be active. We need to probably come up, if this is an alternative that they want to do, show the areas that are the front 3 lots that would all be C2. So there'd be a sliver to rezone, leave the back part C3, and then add this use to the C3 zone. And we could bring that back. We obviously have to advertise the 10 days and all that stuff. So I don't know if we can get it back the next meeting, but it could be the following meeting.
Okay,
And I thought that's how we ended the conversation last time anyway. Like that was it. The front 3 pieces on State Street would be C2, the back would be C3. And that was agreed upon, said, yeah, that looks good. And for the same exact concerns we have today.
And I believe you wanted to see a specific plat for the front 3 parcels, which we've been working on and we have.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
and
had the
you
same
had ample
recollection.
time to do that. It's just something
Yeah, I
that,
was just saying that's where I remember leaving it off.
yeah.
And that's what.
Yeah, and
maybe
that's
that was-
exactly how this
Yeah.
looks here. And as far as the back piece, the women's shelter will, given that the deal goes through, there will not be a concern about the zoning for it.
So I just want to step back, Paul, hear your comments in a second, because I mean, the reality is if they put in this women's shelter for the next 30 years, it's going to be there, right? What I'm more concerned about is the other part, whatever that office building and the stuff that's closer to the neighborhood. Because this women's shelter is perfect. It needs to go there and the sooner the better, right? But I think the risk we're taking is that office or the other part of it, which is the office under contract as well.
The office is part of the same group, yeah.
So it's
they'll
the
be-
same group as contracting. for
Correct, yeah,
both.
we're not proposing a
But the
separate
office could
office
be a
development. It's
much taller building right on the sidewalk.
The
in a
language
C-
was
C2.
minimum 2 floors.
correct.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
language that doesn't.
It's a minimum
not
2
a-
floors, not maximum 2 floors.
No, not maximum 2 floors. So.
Well,
So
you know, the
going to
office-
C2
Oh,
allows.
wait,
it to
I'm
go
sorry,
up.
maximum
Yeah.
2 floors.
It changes though, if it becomes a C2, they have, this is more hypothetical, but they have more, they could go up to 3 or 4, couldn't they? 48 feet.
40 feet.
Yeah.
48.
And it's how far off the sidewalk? It's a lot
Less.
closer to
A
the
lot closer,
sidewalk.
yeah,
than-
on both ends,
Yeah.
residential and 8th North.
It's about
Yeah, so I think there's a risk for just doing the total change over to C2.
If I
Paul, if
could,
you want to address that risk, but I don't know how, you want to make us feel comfortable, make us feel comfortable.
Well, let me make a couple of comments if I could. I've done a lot of development agreements. I'm not afraid to do that. I don't know if we need to continue this till a development agreement is done or just make it a condition that a development agreement would be presented with the city council, which would be simple to do.
That's typically how the city has done it. So the planning commission will review it and make a recommendation, and then we will make sure that development agreement, if that's the direction the applicant wants to go, at the time of city council.
Right, and we can do that. I think the other concern I've got is we keep talking about, well, what happens in 30 years? I've been doing this for 35 years, and I haven't seen one ordinance in the city stay static in that entire time. It changes all the time. You know, I think I can understand the concern, what happens 30 years from now. All the ordinances are going to change over the next few years. You guys are going to change ordinances. You know, to sit down and say, well, we're terrified to move forward because of something that may happen 25 or 30 years in the future. You need to deal with what's happening now. You've got a good piece of property there. We can limit it to 2-story buildings by development agreement. We can make sure the ground is used up and is put to a productive purpose. It's going to take care of this community. I don't know what's going to happen 30 years from now.
No, I agree with you, Paul. I agree with you. I mean, we understand your situation, but I thought you were presenting the women's shelter, not the entire development. Are you representing the women's shelter or the entire development?
These gentlemen here own the development. They are probably, I guess, representing themselves. I'm here representing the center for the women and children.
Perfect.
But we're working together to
Oh,
try
I
and
see.
get
Oh,
this
that
done.
makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
trying to work together.
Well, I
Yes.
think I know. I just don't want it to be masked by only the women's shelters.
Right.
So that's,
Something? Yeah.
no, so I think,
Steve, I'm gonna.
sure.
There we go. So if you want to go down this path of doing a development agreement, then you would need to continue it because there's basically some new state law that's been enacted that basically requires the planning commission to consider the requirements or limitations of a development agreement as well as the city council. So that's what you would need to do if you wanted to go down that path.
Yeah, no, I think it would be a lot cleaner just to get the SLUs for the women's shelter and back to the original agreement that we had with the developer. The 3 spots in the front, the back piece, women's shelter goes in. And we definitely moved your first piece right away because you had it under contract, you about lost it. So we care about your money.
Absolutely.
That's not the issue. And we would love to see the women's shelter put in place. It just seems like it got more complicated for no reason. So tell us what we need to do to add the women's shelter as an SLU.
So this item would need to be continued, and we'd work with the applicant to come back with both the rezone of the front part being C2, and then we'd add that as an SLU code into the C3 zone.
Which is what we're expecting today. from
So
the last
different
conversation.
applications, so we'd bring them both at the same time.
Okay.
So just to recap, so I understand, just so
Yeah.
I'm clear. So what you're suggesting is the front sliver piece that's currently C3 gets rezoned to C2 or gets approval for C2 today. And then the back portion that's currently C3, adding text to the code that allows for this particular use within C3. Is that, and then we come back in for that particular use within C3 to get it added to the zone?
I think we'd have to continue the front portion as well.
The front portion has to be continued. It can't be approved.
I don't think we
It's
can,
not plotted.
because we'd have to continue the whole thing.
Okay.
And then there's the other issue. We still need to have a public hearing before we
Correct.
make a motion. So I'm going to pause here and let's do the public hearing. Going to open up for public comments. If anyone's here who'd like to would like to speak on this issue, please come forward to the podium, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Okay. No one's coming forward, so I'll close the public meeting. Thank you. Okay.
Right.
Oh, Ryan, yeah.
Steve, in the last meeting, we were able to rezone the car wash to C2, but not the rest of the property. Could they move forward with rezoning the sliver tonight to C2? Therefore, we only come back and do the C3. SLU.
Yeah, if they're comfortable doing that, similar to what was done before, they could do that again.
Okay.
Do we have the boundaries for the front piece?
because it
Or as
looks,
shown.
Doesn't it move back to meet, it just moves back to meet with the car wash, correct?
those lines keep changing.
That's true.
That's, I'd like to see some solidified map saying this is what it's going to be.
Yeah,
So that we have maybe 4 plots or 2 plots.
right. And this is how it'll be platted, right? The only thing, I can't tell where that, here, you can come up and chat too. Jared, this is Jeremy Weber. He's the development manager. Also, he's been closely tied working with our engineer.
Good evening. So those lot lines on the front pads on State Street for the 2 restaurants are the proposed lot lines for our plat amendment that we're working on to submit to the city for review. The only thing that could change here or that will change is the size. There's a thin detention tract or detention pond that is intended to serve those pads on State Street. We would need that. I mean, we would probably request that be rezoned to C2 as well to be consistent with the uses that are served by that detention pond. What's shown here as the detention pond size is changing very slightly. It's getting a little bit shorter. But for the most part, these are the lot lines that we are proposing in our plat amendment that should be submitted to the city in the next couple of weeks here.
Take it all together, yeah.
Yeah. I think we're looking at continuing and just taking care of it all together.
I would agree.
Yeah, and I don't think that slows to continue. I don't think that makes a big difference to us in our timing to continue it to the next discussion.
Okay.
The rezone part of it, the front.
Okay, then I make a motion, we continue this item to our next meeting.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
So,
Oh, wait. Did we do something else? Sorry, go ahead.
we don't have time next to advertise and everything for the next meeting.
Okay, so
would have to be
the
the following.
June, whatever, the second one in June,
Yeah,
which I can't remember what week it is.
yeah, we
Yeah,
don't
just
have
we'll
enough time
continue
to
it.
advertise.
Okay, I'll re-say that. We'll just continue it.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item 3.2.
Can I just add a quick question? So are we
Yeah.
rezoning the C3 part? I mean, the C2 part to C3 on the south end?
We're just continuing it right now.
Okay.
Because it's
And-
allowed, technically is allowed in down there, so.
All right. Item 3.2. This is for design imaging. We're vacating 3 lots in the industrial park, TNT Industrial Park Plat B, and approving the site plan and final plat of the W3 subdivision Plat A, which will combine 3 lots into 1. This shows those 3 lots on Industrial Park Road currently. And we are combining into 1. This is the demolition plan. There's currently a building on one of those 3 lots that will be demolished and a new building will be built. This shows the new site plan. And the final plat, combining those 3 into 1 lot. This shows what the elevations will look like for that building. They also are meeting the zone requirements for parking with differentiating between warehouse and office space. And this shows what it currently looks like. So that building will be demolished and the new building will be built. And staff recommends approval for this. Did you have any questions on this one?
So they already own all 3 lots. They just want to, they
do.
just want to combine them.
Correct. And they
Cool.
own the property across the street as well.
Right.
Would the applicant like to come forward and say anything?
We're happy you're growing. That's good.
Growth is a good thing, but it brings a lot of challenges. Yeah, we own the building that's across the street on the east side. Bought these parcels 2 years ago, have been using them as a material storage warehouse, but need more space. So we'd like to combine them, knock down the 40-year-old warehouse that is ugly and really ugly inside and build something fresh and new.
You don't like that yellow?
Say
That's
that
my
again.
favorite color.
Is
We don't love the mustard yellow, but the inside's the real problem.
Yeah, is it not functional? Is it?
It's functional, but it was built in the 1970s in 3 different phases. So there are interior walls that really interfere with productive use inside. And it's 15,000 square feet right now. And we would like, it occupies one of the 3 parcels. By using the entire 3 parcels in a cohesive fashion, we can get about 40,000 square feet of building there.
We're excited for it. It'll be great.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions by the commissioners? Okay.
I'll make a motion. Okay. I recommend we vacate.
It is a public hearing. though.
Oh,
right.
sorry.
I thought that and then never mind. Yeah, it's a public hearing. So I will open this to a public hearing. And I will close the public hearing. Now you may continue.
Okay, let me try that again. I recommend that we vacate lots 19, 21, and 23 of TNT Industrial Park, Plat B, and approve the site plan and final plat of W3 subdivision, Plat A, located generally at 1113 North Industrial Park Road in the M2 zone.
I second it.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes.
All right, item 3.3. This is for approving the Orem Center State Plaza subdivision currently located at 40 West Center Street. It shows that there are currently 2 lots. They would like to separate that into 5 lots, with each lot having a building on it, an existing building. They will not be adding any additional buildings. This shows those 5 lots in the preliminary plat. They have existing easements and cross-access, drainage and utilities. There's reciprocal parking in place, and they will not be adding anything new. It's just basically lines on paper separating these 2 lots into 5. This is the final plat. This shows what it looks like currently from Center Street. And staff recommends approval. And did you have any questions on this one?
Is the applicant here?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Is there anything that prevents them from vacating easements? Like, so they have an easement in order to meet their parking requirements. Can they release that easement and now they don't meet the parking requirement?
So it's all reciprocal, so they'd have to have, both parties would have to agree.
Well, that's one party. So,
Well, if it's 5 different lots, then
but they're all owned by the same
they're all
person. So
currently- they're all
they
currently
could
owned by the same
vacate that easement and they would no longer be compliant with parking.
they would have to amend the agreement that they have.
Okay.
The other option is to add it to the language to the plat itself that basically requires all the lots to have reciprocal access and parking.
Yeah, because it seems like we could end up in a situation where you're getting around the parking requirements for those each individual lots by being able to get rid of the easement.
So it could be a condition of approval that you just
Or drawing
add
the
that on
line
the
such
plat
that the
itself.
parking you
Yeah.
require is part of the lot.
Mike, let's invite the applicant up and then we can ask him directly.
Let's figure out what they're.
It's okay. I was trying.
Let's figure out what the risk is. I'm curious about. I think your questions.
Hi there. Good evening, commissioners. And my name is Rick Magnus with AWA Engineering, representing the applicant, and the owner is here also this evening. And we appreciate your time on this item. And before I address your question, I just want to let you know that your staff is amazing. Okay. I just publicly need to let you guys know that. So thank you very much for that. So to address your question, the reason for changing these parcels and having numerous ones is so you can transfer ownership on each use in the subdivision. Now you're going to have 5 or more owners agree to not have parking, to not have access. They wouldn't have access to the commercial driveways that come off of State Street. They will not do that. It actually is beneficial, and these agreements have been in place and it's been functioning very well for a long time. There is no need that any of them would want to vacate. So I appreciate you being concerned that that could go away, but it can't, because there's recorded documents that protect that property from having that happen.
Can we go back to the 5 lot? Okay, so we understand the financial need to divide it so we can have the freedom of selling one business at a time instead of being stuck. But does any of these lots does not have appropriate parking if it was a standalone building, regardless of the reciprocal agreement?
There are some that don't have the total amount. That's why a shared access agreement and shared parking is needed, because the overall, it does meet that.
So what? And then if one of the new owners comes in and decides to tear down the building and build a new place, all those agreements will still stay standing?
They would, but the new project would have to meet current standards, which would mean they would have to add more parking. So to bring that site, whatever property decides to develop, that itself would have to meet the current parking standard
On its own.
on its own, unless there was sufficient offsite that collectively they could do as long as the reciprocal active, or as long as reciprocal parking is still active. So the way that it sits now, it's legal non-conforming, right? Because there's probably a few stalls short of current standard. By doing anything new would bring that into current compliance. So in talking to our attorney here, Gary, we do probably need to at least put on the plat the entry numbers and things of those reciprocal, and just make sure that that's on the plat itself so that we know that they're active reciprocal easements, which we could just add that, as part of the final plat.
And that sounds fine, because that quite often is the case that those agreements are listed. So
Would we need to put that in the motion? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, and I concur with staff recommendations. How's that?
Of course you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And this one does not require a public hearing, so we can move to motion.
What kind of language do you want to add? You want us to add in there for the reciprocal agreements? Do you have anything specific?
Probably just that the reciprocal agreements are listed on the plat itself.
The
And we can-
recording entry numbers.
Most likely, Mr. McGinn here is going to be the ones that actually, as far as the attorney's signature goes, before it's recorded, we'll make sure that that's what he wants it to read.
All right. So the specific language,
Just that the reciprocal easements need to be listed on the plat, the exact language. We'll put that on and make sure it meets the legal requirements. I kind of need to see all the agreements first before come up with standard language here
okay. but
tonight.
For purposes of the motion, can I make the motion and see if it's right? The planning commission, I move that the planning commission approve the Orem Center State Plaza subdivision located generally at 40 West Center Street in the C2 zone with the added reciprocal agreement language added to the plat.
Yes, that works.
Okay.
I second.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 3.4. All right. You guys ready?
We are ready.
All right.
Again, I'm Sam Kelly, city engineer. I have with me John Dorney. He is with Horrocks Engineers, and he has a brief presentation. It's pretty similar to the one that we gave you guys a few weeks ago in the work session. We'll go through that, and then we will entertain any questions you have on the transportation or the update to the transportation master plan.
Still can get the formatting. Here's some meetings that we've attended and presented this to. Sorry about the formatting. I assume I can't get Google Slides to work in a PowerPoint very well here. Everything in greens happened already tonight. At the end there is blue, and May 17th. Our hope is to go to city council meeting and adopt. We
started this or took a 2015 version of this and updated it. So it wasn't a complete redo, but it was pretty substantial still. These are all the items that we updated: existing counts, base counts, level of service of roadways, cross sections where we get into lane widths, curb, gutter, sidewalk. If you see a kind of a profile of a road, you'll see landscape, bike lanes, park strips. We updated those. We also took out the elements that were in the State Street Master Plan, the high density districts. Those were in there originally. We took those back out. We updated the travel demand model. Well, I should say MAG. Between 2015 and now, they switched their future horizon year from 2040 to 2050. So the model kicked out another 10 years and everything shifts. And we did incorporate their plan through 2050 and their recommendations. And additionally, there's cost estimates to everything that you see in here. Again, we have access management standards, traffic calming guidelines, a toolbox, traffic impact study guidelines, and the Southwest Street Network Plan. Those were all updated and included in the appendix. What we do is we look at the high level. You can see the upper left there. I say Payson to Ogden. Sam corrected me today. It actually goes to Brigham City now. So the travel model goes from Payson to Brigham City, and it looks at traffic across the whole valley. It takes 8 hours to run on a supercomputer. So it's pretty substantial. So because of that so large, we take and looked at Orem City more detailed. It's like when you zoom in on a computer screen and it gets all fuzzy, we remove that fuzz by subdividing the traffic and the land use zones a little better than the model did, because it tried to account for half the state almost. So when we zoomed into Orem, we adjust these customizations for Orem: population, employment, zoning, land use. This is just a list of about 20 things where we look at, okay, the model says this, but what does Orem have in its zoning specifically? And if a traffic analysis zone that MAG had said you have 100 homes in there and there's really 500 homes or vice versa, we adjusted that. And we kind of fine tune it specific to Orem. We get recommendations after the model's output. We review it with staff, with OTAC, with internal staff. We consult the general plan to make sure we don't conflict with the general plan, get public input, and now we're in the adoption process. So we did take this really large model and curtail it specific to Orem based on your land use and zoning. This is kind of a what we call the TAZ map, traffic analysis zone map. This is the Orem boundary with the different zones. And when we got this from MAG, there wasn't as many zones. Like I said, if you treat it like pixels, you get a better picture if you have more pixels. We subdivided your zones to get a better, more accurate feeling. And we also updated the traffic counts. We obtained counts ourselves. We got counts from Orem City. We got counts from UDOT, and pretty substantial count network that you guys have at the city. Your staff maintains a pretty good database that other cities don't. We might do 10 or 15 counts in an entire city. You have like 50 in there. What we're trying to do is estimate level of service. You've heard that terminology, and what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. And you're not driving down the road going, no, this is a level of service C road. You just know this is congested or not congested. And when it's not congested, you may not think about it. When it is congested, you think about it. And this is kind of a visual representation of A, B, C, D, E, F. And Orem standards are currently level of service D, and so are UDOT's. There's discussions about maybe loosening those up and going to E, and there's pros and cons to that. But basically, this is kind of an idea. When you go to severely congested, it's just gridlock, bad. So we're trying to avoid that, but also not build ourselves out so that you drive around with level of service B, but you have 8-lane roads. That's the goal. And this is the black box kind of behind the level of service. How do we determine what the level of service is? This roadway level of service on the left talks about the type of road. So you can see arterial and collector. You can see the number of lanes. Collectors have more accesses, sometimes driveways. garbage pickup, more activity. And so the 2 or 3 lane collector has less capacity than an arterial, because arterials typically have longer spacing at intersections, less direct access. And so as you go from local collector arterial or a principal arterial, you end up with more capacity with the same number of lanes. And that's how roadways are looked at. Intersections are more mathematical. There's a equation that spits out these numbers, and these are in seconds of delay on the right. The intersection level of services, the experience you have when you go to an intersection, if you're there for 20 to 35 seconds, it's considered level of service C, and that's average. So they try to take an average, and it's a guess, it's an algorithm. And so the roadway level of service is different than the intersection level of service, but we try to humanize it. Like, what does that mean? Like you said, you don't drive through the intersection and think of a letter grade, you think of traffic or no traffic. So we established existing level of service. You can see intersections here. You can see road segments here. You see green, yellow, and red. And so those represent green's good, yellow's okay. It's technically, I think, level of service D and acceptable, but E and F are not good. And it's kind of a broad brush of the regional roads throughout the city. Then we kind of projected into the future. It's not that far in the future. 2030 is just around the corner. But if we didn't build anything, what would the road system look like in Orem? And you can see again, green, red, yellow, and that just represents congestion. And so the model tells us, okay, looking at your land use, your neighbor's land use, vineyards land use, provos, all those, it passes through your city. And you've mentioned that before about traffic around the neighbors, surrounding cities. And this is an estimate of what that will look like. We did that same thing for 2050. What if we did nothing till 2050? What would the roads look like? What does that mean for the driver? Red means congestion, backup, inconvenience. And so we say, okay, how do we get out of that? What do we build? What do we do to try to reduce those red roads to at least a yellow road and maybe a green road? And this map is what we is kind of the answer of the master plan. This is what we identify as being needed. And this isn't a request to build. We're not saying approve these projects and we'll get building. This is really just identifying what the model says in 30 plus years or so, what may happen as we continue this direction. And I believe that's my last slide.
The one thing that I would like to add is, as we go back to the very beginning and we look at where we were at with this process and those dates, we started off with the Transportation Advisory Commission, and that's a citizen group. And you can see where they provided that letter. We went through a fairly exhaustive effort of going through this plan, going through all the projects, going through the different components of it and the appendices. And that's when they generated this letter, because they felt like, what can we do? As we explained the projects, we explained the RTP, how we match in with what MAG does, looking at all the projects that we had I identified in there, as well as all those projects are tied to our impact fees. As developers come through and they're paying their impact fees to develop, that's a list of projects that we can go ahead and utilize those dollars for improvements for the city. But just wanting to know that we went through, it was about a 3-month process with our Transportation Advisory Commission going through this, vetting it. And that's when they came up with this letter that they wanted to include. And that's where we came up with kind of that philosophy of, hey, we can't build ourselves out of congestion. We need to look at lowering our level of service, and then also looking at other componentry. As this develops, we're going to have to try and do what we can to balance what we have for transportation, not just for vehicles, but for pedestrians and cyclists. We also went through a process where we went to the Public Works Advisory Commission, and brought this same plan forward to them and the letter, and we were soliciting feedback as well as to what we need to do. And they felt the same way as the Transportation Advisory Commission did, in that we probably need to look at not always trying to make our level of service to be a D or a C, because we all realize as soon as we do that, it's infill. It's kind of like digging a hole in the sand on the beach. You keep digging down, you get it bigger, and then water comes in. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So with that, they adopted the plan as it was, with this letter too, that there's some different philosophies. And then since then, with all of this, Murray has provided some recommended verbiage that he wanted to have in there that addresses connectivity. So those are some things that the edits by Murray are something that you guys can go ahead and forward to the city council. The Transportation Advisory Commission would like to have that letter as part of this package as well. So with that,
Further on this graphic, I wanted to explain a little bit more of the colors. If you don't, this isn't a level of service graphic. You can see the red circles and the red lines. This is an ownership graphic. UDOT owns the intersections and roadways in red. MAG doesn't own the roads in red, but they're part of the regional transportation plan. And the green ones are city-owned roads, 100% city funding, not MAG, not UDOT. And so if you look at the cells and the blocks and the callouts, you'll see RTP 1, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Those have to do with years of when they feel like it needs to be done. So phase 1 is up to 2030, phase 2 is up to 2040, phase 3 is up to 2050. And the vision ones are beyond 2050. They're so far out there that they're like, it's likely needed, but it's so far out there, you're going to have like 8-10 master plans done by the time, versions of this by the time we get out there. So that's what this map is showing.
Can I ask a question for clarification?
Sure.
So the purple dot in roads says MAG and city. And is that because the city and MAG agree that they're major roads, or those ones MAG has identified but are city owned?
So what those are showing is that all of these facilities that are on this, or all these projects on this map, have been identified in the regional transportation plan. So the ones that are the orange or red are essentially going to be, it's a UDOT facility, and likely it's going to be funded through UDOT means. MAG could participate with some of their funding for that. The ones that are obviously going to be green and or blue, that's where the blue ones have been identified in the regional transportation plan. They've been accepted, adopted, and if and when the city decides to move and bring forward action to move that project forward, then MAG realizes that they're also a partner with that, and they understand that they're going to have to provide funding. When MAG puts together their regional transportation plan, they have to do it in such a way that it's fiscally constrained. They can't just go ahead and make this whole plan for billions of dollars of project, and yet there's no way to fund it. So understanding that, they've also had to go back, and some of these projects that are phase 1 are being moved to phase 2, because currently with the current MAG plan, there was an assumption that the state or the cities, or it's only the state or the city would bond for these projects. And that's not the direction that we want to move. So a lot of these projects are actually going to be bumped. There's some that are in phase 1. If they're lower on the priority of phase 1, they'll move to phase 2, and it'll be a trickle down effect. And then to John's point, the ones that are visionary, there's going to be more of those move to that vision component of it. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, in general, there are city streets, but MAG has decided that they would be willing to give us funding to do maintenance, building out whatever we needed to do on those pieces.
They can't. Willing,
Not
or committed.
maintenance is
Yeah,
the wrong
fund
word,
can't go
but I
towards
meant
willing,
like expansion.
yeah. Willing or committed.
I think they have to still go through all the approval processes.
So it may not happen. Every 2 years, there's an idea report and a concept report, and every city in the county lobbies for their projects. So you pick your top 2 or 3 and you go all in. And those are the most important ones. So they're committed to spending $60 to $100 million in Utah County every 2 years. And it's a competition, but they're usually pretty fair. And there's a process That's what I meant too, is that this isn't an approval to build. This just keeps them on this list, and not all these will be built in the time frame. And this isn't a complete list of all the RTP roads. These are just the additional projects. You can see that parts of major roads, or what we call regionally significant roads in your city, are not on this map, color coded, because they're not a project, but they still are part of the regional road network. So this is just a project list, not a comprehensive list of regional roads.
It's kind of a carrot, right? These are the roads we want you to widen. And
No,
we'll
it's-
give you some
it's
money
not-
if you do it.
MAG doesn't have anything to do with this process. It's completely done through the city level.
Yeah.
Well, they identified it through their modeling.
Right.
Yeah.
What they're
And so
saying is,
they do, because they're telling you, here's where we're gonna pain points. So you're gonna want to widen those in order to alleviate those pain points.
Yeah.
what they have done is they've taken their model and they look at the model and they address and they see those levels of service. And they said, because what happens is we don't necessarily run that model every year. So MAG, and they go ahead and they run the model and they say, hey, look, Orem, we've ran our model. We've looked at our economic growth. We've looked at your zones. We've looked at where populations are moving, where your business centers are. And according to our model, you need to look at these corridors and these facilities that these are probably going to be some pinch points. And when we say that as MAG, and MAG adopts the plan, they are essentially committing to using those federal dollars to help us with those projects and those problems. Now, then it's up to us when we decide to make that happen and how we want to make it happen. And because they're just saying it needs to be widened to 5 lanes. Really what they're saying, it needs to accommodate 2 lanes in either direction. If we wanted to narrow it up and put a double yellow line like a median down there and not have left turns, and it would accommodate moving traffic north and south, we can go ahead and do that. But what they're saying is that, hey, this right here is going to have more than, I guess, if we went back to that level of service, it's going to have more than, if you're looking at level of service, if we're at a 3 lane and we're on an arterial, there's 15,000 cars. They're saying in 2040, we're seeing that's going to have 20,000 cars on there, and you need to add an extra lane. So however you guys want to do that, you guys go ahead and go through your process, but we're going to be committing and knowing in the back of our minds, these are our priority projects. And when we go through that 2-year tip selection cycle, those are the projects that hold more weight, because as they bring those projects forward, to what John was saying, you have an idea report, then they're ranked and graded both by MAG staff and by one representative from all the communities here in the county, and they receive a score. And obviously, if those projects are on these plans, not only on MAG's plan, but on those cities' transportation master plans, they're going to score higher. You have the outlier. Currently, there's another city up north. They're adding projects that haven't had any studies. They haven't been on any plans, and they're just saying, hey, we need another freeway connection. That really doesn't sit that well when we've gone through all this effort of going through studies, going through plans, and we're identifying, hey, this is a path we're going. And now you're coming up with this multi-million-dollar ask and you have no study behind it. So there is a process to this madness. I know it seems kind of crazy and chaotic, and it's crazy that it takes a computer eight hours to come up with all this modeling data. But it's really essentially saying, hey, we see these issues. If you guys want to address them, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. But if you want to get access to some dollars to help you out, so you're paying 7 cents on the dollar, have these in this plan. If you even wanted to do, you might be able to buy some capacity by doing some intersection improvements. You may need, if we had to add multiple lanes to add a dedicated right turn, a through lane, and a left, and we're looking at full takes on all 4 corners, we're looking at a couple $1 million, right? You're probably 3, 4, 5, 500,000. And that's a lot of money for the city to come up with to do an intersection. But if it's been identified on one of these corridors and in this plan, then I can go ahead and get some corridor preservation dollars from the county, or I can go to MAG and say, hey, this is our project. This is what we're planning on doing. And if it scores well, then it gets funded in the next funding cycle, which is usually 3 or 4 years out. So then the city's essentially getting a bargain to go ahead and help with some transportation improvements.
And none of these are eminent domain.
No.
MAG and Orem City doesn't participate in eminent domain. So it would have to be willing seller, willing buyers.
Okay, Ryan?
Yeah, because
Yeah, I just thought it'd be helpful that one of those projects on that map in front of you, it's guess it's purple dot. It's right in the bottom center. It's the 1200 South, 400 West roundabout improvement. That project's actually in design right now. That's a dangerous roundabout. It has multiple entrances. And if you've ever driven through it, it's really easy to miss someone coming in. It's not big enough. It's not wide enough as per roundabout standards. So that project is a joint project using MAG funding. Our match, Sam, is 6.75%. Is that correct?
6.77%.
77%. So that what's our budget on that project?
We're probably close to $2 million.
So we're only, our Orem taxpayers out of our sales tax and property tax are only paying 6.77% of that total cost. If we weren't partners with MAG on that, we would be paying that entire amount. So that's just kind of an example of one of these projects. And that project's been on the map for 10, 15 years, I think.
I think as long as I've been here, and that's 20.
And we hope to build it next year finally. So just to kind of give you a little bit of behind the scenes on how things get done.
To add to that, if a developer comes in and wants to build on any of these roads and it's in the master plan as being X amount wide, they basically give you the land. But if it's not on the master plan, you can't request it. You can't require it.
Yeah, and then that's even happened with Lakeview Parkway. It's in there and we know it's coming. It's imminent. They can't necessarily give us the land, but we at least have the authority then for all their structures to be set back. When we have the project, we will come in and actually purchase that property. So we're planning for this. We're making sure that we don't have structures right in the way and that we're having to buy structures. We are buying land. It is fair, but we do have it does help us out at least with making sure that the buildings are set back and we're not tearing down something that was just freshly built.
So I have a comment. We've just spent 30 minutes talking about a very small plot of land, whether we should rezone it, from C2 to C3. And we spent 30 minutes on something that might affect 10 or 12 homeowners in Orem. And now we're sitting here and you are asking us to approve widening 1600 Center, 1200 Geneva Road. It seems like almost everything on phase one is going to affect 100% of Orem residents. And I haven't sat through any presentation to really understand the implication of each one of these. It seems very overwhelming to me. And I guess I'm not sure what the role of the Planning Commission is if we're going to spend 30 minutes on such a small item, and then we're expected just to say yes on something that no one has ever even presented to us. Now, I'm new. Perhaps my fellow commissioners have seen presentations. This just seems very, it feels like you want us to rubber stamp this without us understanding it.
Well, we did come before you in a work session back in January.
We actually have some dates here. We can talk about where we went through some.
Before Christmas, and then the report has been shared with everyone. It was on Planning Commission at that time, and then it was distributed. I know that when you and Mike were put on, it was handed out as well. And it does seem overwhelming, and I totally understand where you're coming from. But the Transportation Advisory Commission, which is made up of residents that are appointed by the council, just like you, they are the ones that vet our transportation projects and make those recommendations. And that is who we've really relied on in this process. And so that's kind of where this is an update as well. The real massive outreach was back when the original plan was done in 2015.
I think I would ask, could we schedule it into our working sessions where you could bring all of us up to speed, where as a planning commission, we could make the best decision possible, because I feel like I'm voting blind.
And I guess to understand, you're adopting a plan. You're not adopting any projects. I mean, these are plans that have been identified, or projects that have been identified in a plan. To move forward with the project, it's still a very long process. It's a very public process. It's meeting with staff, administration, bringing it likely to the council and the mayor. at least the mayor to say, hey, is this something that we want to do? And if it is, the first thing we're going to do is do a study to see if it's viable. The next thing we would do is we'd have a public meeting and invite the neighborhood, the residents who live on that corridor to come and see what we're proposing and lay it out for them. This is the cost. These are the needs. These are the options. And if you want to move forward with it, great. If you don't, then we don't. So it's not as if I'm going to run out and hurry up and do these projects and we're going to be buying property. This is simply a plan that's been identified by a model that says, hey, these are some pinch points. You put it in this plan, you're eligible to get money to help you study these and make sure that they're done correctly. Even for a study, you were talking a couple $100,000 to have that done, and I only have to pay 7 cents on that dollar. So I understand it seems a little overwhelming and it seems like it's a lot, but there's no way I would go out and do any of these. I've already been to enough meetings to understand that that's not how you do a project, especially of these magnitudes. When you're spending 30 or $40 million, that's not how we would do it. So
if we're not in a hurry, why can't you take a little bit more time to educate the current planning commission?
the only thing
Yeah, I
that's
don't
that's a
know if
hurry
everything on the
component.
plan is something we want to adopt.
The only hurry component with this is that when you adopt it and you adopt the projects that are in it, then we can go ahead and update our impact fees. That's the biggest thing. Is right now we're going through the process of updating our impact fees for sewer, water, stormwater, parks, police, and traffic and transportation is part of that. So we're just trying to update this to make sure that, one, the projects in there we've accounted for in inflationary costs, because if we do decide, hey, there's a signal that needs to happen at 8th West and 8th South, and that is in our transportation master plan. It's been identified in our impact fee facility plan. And we need to have all those things in place. And with that being said, we want to make sure that the prices we have in there are accurate, because if they're really low, we're not collecting enough money, we may not be able to do those projects. We'd have to pull from other resources. So that's really the only hurry up component to this, is we're trying to update our impact fees.
So the impact fees are associated with new development, right?
Yes.
So all of those corridors are already built. So there's not going to be a lot of new development.
Not necessarily.
I can address that. So any new development that takes place in the city, they're required to pay impact fees, including police, fire, parks, streets, water, and storm drain and sewer.
Right, but they're all built out. I mean, there's not a lot of empty lots in those
This is
spaces. I mean,
anywhere,
you
this
tear
is
things
anywhere in
down.
the city that a project happens.
So that would
for
encourage commercial
and
manufacturing.
Just
residential
on these
homes
redevelopment.
as well.
Just on these areas.
Yeah.
So if we don't have our impact fees updated, any new development that comes in the city in the meantime will pay a different impact fee rate. Now, whether
Less, I
it's
assume.
appropriate or not, we don't know.
We can
if it goes
update
up
them
or down.
without these areas, right? We're not bound to not update the rest of the city because we don't want to adopt this.
Well, you're trying to take it in the aggregate and figure out what it looks like we're going to need over X number of years, correct?
Right. So what happens is the impact fees are developed off of essentially a 10-year plan. So what we want to do is we want to update our transportation master plan to reflect, hey, how many of those projects, because now we're looking at 6 or 7 years ago that we have adopted it. Have those projects been completed? Yes. Then we remove those from that list. And then we update the costs, because obviously inflation was not the same back in 2015 as it is now.
Yeah.
So we do that. And then we look at, hey, have any of these other projects moved up in that time frame? And we add those to the list. And that's really the reason why we're doing this for impact fees.
Hey, someone wanted to say something.
It looks like there was a work session yesterday, is a city council work session, or what is that? What?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Peterson, were you in this work session
Today?
yesterday?
Yesterday's.
Yes.
Could you enlighten us on what was the conversation like yesterday?
That would be me to invite him.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
I do want to ask you that question, but in a minute. Can you hold it for just a little bit?
That's
Is
that's
that
good.
what yours? Yeah. Yeah. And several of us here were also in that work session. You can come forward now, Terry.
Now I can come up.
Now you can come up and speak.
So repeat the question.
What came out of the work session yesterday for city council and what?
About transportation.
About transportation, the transportation master plan.
So, you got 7 individuals that all have different issues and different concerns. So, but a general concern about some of the major corridors, 16th North, 8th East, how disruptive that would be to neighborhoods. And this was brought, I've heard this comment today, but with the goal of trying to do what? I guess this, I just summarized it by saying there's some concern and some questions. And it's a huge document that's put together. So it's the same kind of, it's just pretty much an echo what I'm hearing now. It's just make sure that we get this right.
And I mean, how do you view the impact fee? Like, what's the timing on that one? Like, if we continue this, is it going to mess up the impact fee schedule?
Yeah, what do we leave? What kind of an
I don't know if
increase
you know
in
the answer to
impact
that one.
fee?
It's in process right now. The Parks Master Plan was updated 2 or 3 months ago. Is another need that had to be done. And this is the last thing that needs to be finished for them to button up that study.
But we don't
So
have a
they're-
deadline.
They're
If-
waiting on us.
If we don't meet it by, June 1st, then we can't do it till next June
Um,
1st, right?
I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head when that deadline is, but we were trying to have it done, I think, by the fiscal year, July 1.
Well, I understand
Um,
that, but there's no arbitrary number that says if we don't do it by this date, we can't do it for another year.
No, the longer we go without updated impact fees, there's a positive or a negative associated with that. Impact fees may go up, they may go down. We don't know yet what they will do. But say they go up, then any new development that comes in will pay at the current rate, which is a little bit outdated based on inflation right now.
The calculated impact fees are directly tied to these projects. And so if you take a project off, the impact fee goes down because we're saying new development is the reason why we have these needs and they should pay for it. And so as we take the cost of the roads off, the impact fees go down. That's just a
Aren't we
result.
paying like 6 or 7% of the total project anyway?
Only on the ones that we have federal funding tied into.
And how many of those we have federal funding tied into?
On this map here, it would be any of those that have the MAG, the purple
Anything
or
in blue,
blue color. I'm purple colorblind, so I don't know what color that is.
So the actual percentage impact on our Orem City budget is minimal.
We also use those impact fees for other projects that are not on this map. So sidewalk projects, local road projects that we do.
The signal at 4 South 4th West is going to be funded out of impact fees.
Well, I think though, I think you made the point I'm getting to. If the impact fees are going to get charged just because it's there and we don't really want that project, aren't we really fleecing somebody for more money when we know we don't want it? Because we're charging more in impact fees?
Well, I guess.
Well, no, because the reality is 16th North is on the vision list and the impact fee facility plan is based off of the 10-year plan. So even though these projects, to your point, I get what you're saying, but that 16th North project isn't going to be on the 10-year capital plan. It's going to be on your visionary plan. And essentially that visionary project is there because it may change, right? All of a sudden you might have a group of citizenry that live on 16th North and say, you know what, I'm tired of having 30,000 cars in front of my house. I'm tired of having to wait a half hour to leave during the PM peak. I can't get in and get out. I just had someone come the fire department couldn't respond. We need to do something. Then all of a sudden you guys would be like, you know what, it's time. And then with that being said, with this being in the plan, we can get a study going, and then we can get those federal dollars. If not, then it's like, well, I understand that it's a need, but we took that off the plan. Now we got to go back and amend it, add it to it, and then go through the process. So that's really how this would roll out. We're not really fleecing anyone because I would dare say you guys probably agree with most of the phase one projects.
So are you saying, Sam, that really what's important in this plan for the most part is what's going to happen in the next 10 years? That's what we should be focusing in on.
That's what your impact fees are going to look at. Yeah. The impact fee facility plan is going to look at what you can do within the near future. It's
Because
not
everything beyond
necessarily-
10 years is going to be determined down the road anyway.
Well, because what'll happen is we'll come back every five years, we reevaluate the impact fees. So, and we're going to have some of those projects that are going to, that will be complete, that project list change. So, I mean, even to Mr. Washburn's point, I mean, things change here, right? Even though we're looking at this plan and we're trying to tie it down for 2050, things change and they change pretty quickly.
Okay. It would be helpful if we could see kind of what plans or what things were done in the last 7 years. So we get a sense of, of the 25 projects that were for the next 10 years, they did 10 of them or whatever, 5 or 3 or whatever it was. And then also to get a sense of what's going to happen in the next 10 years so that we can kind of get our heads around this.
Okay. I want to go back to, I was going to say, can we cut in and let Terry finish and then?
Sorry,
No,
Terry.
this is just an echo of yesterday. I mean, it's the same kind of concern, same kind of worries about, let's get this right. The city's trying to do their part to make sure we have good transportation. And as citizens, we're trying to figure out what's the best thing to help neighborhoods and be respectful of citizens. So it's the same. And if you see me driving in 2050, you might be in trouble. You might be a little scared to see me driving the road.
Go the other way. Go the other side of the road.
Yeah, be careful.
Terry, have you sat down and gone through with more knowledgeable people, the city council, to where we could go through at least this phase one? Because I'm thinking in order to save time, could we, the planning commission, meet with the city council and have a more in-depth education about what these plans are going to look like? Then we could save time.
I like that. I don't know.
Right. We can do anything that Councilman Peterson wants. I will say though, that majority of these projects are already in our general plan, and 4 of them in particular are already in the works. So it's not like these are brand new things that are coming out of the woodwork.
Is that in the next 10 years or?
Lakeview Parkway, for example, we're already hiring a consultant to start that design. That's the purple or blue line on the bottom left. 16th North, the state is allocated, they're voting soon to allocate funding to that project. We have the roundabout we talked about. Center Street between I-15 and Geneva Road, we have the money for, and we're ready to go to design as soon as Vineyard relocates the railroad spur. So these are plans that have been, to kind of address what Mike brought up, if we're fleecing someone, I think our public works director said it best last night. It's like you're getting married. You get married and you're planning for retirement in 35 to 40 years, and things are going to change. You might end up divorced. You might not have kids. You might have kids. You might adopt kids. But if you don't plan appropriately and you don't have a plan, then you're kind of left in a reactive mode. And the whole point of this whole master plan, and has been for the entire time I've worked here, is it's a plan. There are concepts or ideas. We know where our issues are, and we can either choose to address them or not address them. And if we don't address them, then we have to live with that. And that's the decision that we make. But each project on here that's identified goes through an environmental process, which you may not, probably doesn't ring a bell with you what that means, but that's neighborhood outreach. That's looking at cultural artifacts, historic homes, air pollution, impacts to sensitive lands, wetlands. I think the other one, endangered species. And if it doesn't pass that environmental study, then that project doesn't happen either. So that's part of that outreach and vetting that happens before a project even bounces off of this planning, comes to fruition. So
I think the one part that's the unknown is what does it do to the community?
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got it makes sense. Yeah, if we widen 16th North east of State Street, we can move more traffic, but it's hard to study what that does to that guy that's got his car parked out in the road, now can't park it in the front of the road. His children can't park there to come on Sunday. All those kind of things start. That's the unknown, is what does it do to the neighborhood and the community? So you gotta add that into the moving traffic and the best thing for, and those, they both have to kind of come together
That's an interesting question, Terry, because I don't think I've seen any study that
about
covers
that,
that,
yeah.
the impact on the existing community. I mean, it covers growth and I see your point, by the way, as far as the impact fees. I paid my fair share of impact fees with my projects. So I see your point and I'm not against it. I think it's necessary to collect the appropriate money for future projects as it impacts the city for future plans. And I don't think any of us are having an issue with that. It has to be collected appropriately. And please keep in mind that some of us haven't been here 20 years like you to actually walk through this process in depth and in details. So if it seems like, thank you, can Terry leave?
I'm sneaking away.
Terry can sit down.
Okay.
He has permission.
Yeah.
Just to jump onto Ryan's comment too,
May I-
is
Can
when we first
finish?
get married.
Finish, Mike?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Hasten.
So it's now I hope I can get back to my train of thoughts. Thanks, Terry. No, Terry. But so we just that grace that we're requiring, although it may seem as it's resistance, it's more of grace of understanding. As you've had that grace and we didn't, it's not the fact that we, oh gosh, look, it's a government project, we don't want it, we're representing the citizens. No, we've approved plenty, in fact, way more than we did not. And by the way, it's not even in our power, we just recommended for the city council to go make the final decision, the people that actually get elected based on their zoning and their people. So the grace of understanding is mainly my point, not the fact that can we push it, can we not push it? And the point with Helen was talking about was we've had the last two meetings where they were mind-numbing, boring, quick. And I found that this meeting have a lot of packed things in it at once. And I do understand a couple of things about NLP and running the clock, where I'm never going to be tired to discuss this for as long as I can. I don't have to be home and I have to make a decision right now. And I also, when I look at your end project right before recommending, can you go to that, please?
Which one?
Go forward to a few slides where it says the time frame.
Let's see.
One
The
more
approval,
the time frame of the approval and
Oh,
adoption
the
and
first slide.
yeah. So the language that is used as far as support vote and adoption, that's more of a neuro-linguistic programming to prerequisite what you need. I like to see that language as PC meeting vote, not support vote. And as far as adoption, decision. Because these two words used here are used strategically to kind of subconscious alter our
Wishful thinking is what you're saying.
wishful thinking. Well, it could be wishful thinking, but I've received my proper training in NLP, and I can tell you there could be different words used here that allow freedom of choice, and instead of that's what we need to get done from you. So that's just my 2 cents.
Mike? Okay. Okay.
The one thing I did want to add in even looking at this project map that's different from even the one we did in 2015 are the two intersection improvements, both at University Parkway. We did do a study years ago, and it wasn't that long ago, 3 or 4, in the UVU area, and that's where we identified the Sand Hill Road, University Parkway, Sand Hill Road, RTP Phase 3 project, as well as the Phase 1, where it's the northbound grade separated one. And those were projects that weren't part of the original 2015. So I just wanted to, I guess to just emphasize that these are things that we're looking at constantly, and we're looking at, okay, are there different ways that we can do some things? Because I understand that it's not going to be a desire to go around on 16th North and come down 8th East. But what I really don't want to do is I really don't want it to get to where it's very congested. And now I have the people on 12th North that don't want that traffic. I got the people on 4th East all of a sudden that don't want that traffic. So, I mean, I understand I'm speaking to you all, but I also speak to a lot of different citizens throughout the week, and I'm handling all kinds of questions. And And those are the things that happen. And it may not be what they want on this street, but if we don't take care of it, it bleeds over into other streets. So I'm here to serve you guys and help you out. And if you guys want to meet with me and we can go through this, I'm willing to do that as well. I know you guys want to meet with council, and that's fine as well, but we can sit down and go through this, and anytime.
Okay. Jason, did you have a comment?
Well, Sam, I know your intentions are great. And I've never seen you more excited about a project than this. In fact, so I know you've done your homework, and I've worked with you personally in different areas in the city. You're extremely responsive, very responsible for what you do. So I just don't want to come across that we don't trust your opinion. It's absolutely not that. It's just that packet requires
This is a bit more
just a little-
technical.
the smudge. I mean, it'd be like a pinpoint pen ball in the whole stream of the line you've been working on it. Just allowed us that are not sophisticated as you are in this area to consider multiple variables. And most likely, being the expert, I've always worked with experts, and they're always right? Like they know more than I do, and they open our eyes to things. So the entire city, by the way, is the same way. Having come from the side of don't take my land to, oh my gosh, no, you guys have a plan. Let's talk about it. And everything adjusted. So we're just, I don't know, skittish to push forward without proper studies.
Okay, it's understandable.
So can we table this until we get a little further education from you? And maybe work with the city council to, not to waste a lot of your time. You could educate all of us at the same time. Because I don't think any of us want to vote yes, and I don't think any of us want to vote no either. I think we just want more education.
And by the way, whatever we do, I think should come with an action plan where we're going to do this. Let's decide on a time to meet and receive some education, not just, oh, we're not voting. Thank you very much. But we'd love to get an action plan to when to meet and how to do about it. And I don't know if we can propose that in any language, but
Sorry, Terry can come forward if you're done.
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
I'm looking for Steve Earl and
He
you have,
left a while ago.
so the only question I have is we definitely want to value the independence of the planning commission and the city council. So I don't want you to ever sit in with the city council and because they're going one direction, you feel you have to go that direction. That's my only concern about meeting together. A lot of times that's one of the questions they ask at the city council meeting. What are the planning commission? Where do they go with that? What do they think? And there's usually a follow-up question. What was the read, Terry, on that? So that's the only thing I'm thinking about us being all together. I don't want us to lose our independence.
Okay.
So it might take a few more meetings or a few more discussions, but just a thought.
I would actually suggest that maybe you meet with our Transportation Advisory Commission because they've been quite involved in this. Sam, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And could you be there too? Because I really rely a lot on your experience.
Yeah, I can be
Thank
there. I'm always there anyways. So yeah, I could definitely be there. We can be there. Yeah.
And if we could get into a little bit of detail on some of them, we just need a little more understanding.
And that's one of the questions I had, like the questions I have about the transportation master plan. I mean, literally all we've been discussing is the framework and I don't say legalities of adopting it, but literally we're just talking about whether or not we should do this and what's the process. We haven't really gotten into, I have questions about BRT light rail and where some of that is that's included in here and how that's going to be, or some of the things about State Street. And I'm sure we all have those questions, and we haven't really had time to address any of those specific for understanding and discussion for what we see and want.
And we also learned from the BRT that we went over budget a lot. And that kind of, development will happen, but we just want to know the impact.
Yeah, the BRT was a little bit of a anomaly in that was a project that was hatched 7 years prior, and they just essentially grabbed a number and then they had to make it work with that Tiger grant. And I know that UDOT, having them be the major partner in there, and they got creative and having that be a UDOT project and widen it is what helped it because they only had $150 million. And there was some wailing and gnashing of teeth between the city of Orem and UTA. That's probably the best way that I can put it. And it was not as smooth. I mean, it turned out to be a great project. I think overall it's going to be a really good thing. But it was a little rough to get off to start off with, because there were a lot of things that we thought we were getting consideration for. And the fact of the matter is they just didn't have enough money.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do much about it. So it was hard.
So what, I mean, my experience with UDOT, that they finish the projects ahead of time, before projections, and they do get bonuses for it, which I think is a great idea for a quasi to operate. But that is another question. We go in, increase impact study, try to allocate funding from MAG and the feds, and then boom, we don't have funding, just like we didn't for you at the BRT. Deal with it. So it's just to rush. Well, it's not necessarily a rush, but to make a decision based on a promise from an entity to give a specific amount of money that we know for a fact they dropped the ball before is a bit, and it's a bit interesting variable to add into this. That's all.
Okay. Well, technically, there's supposed to be a public hearing. And this is one of my questions, because I will open because I need to, because we've noticed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally nobody's here. And I am surprised for something that has this big of an impact on the city that nobody literally is here, unless I'm missing one person behind Terry, and I think he was here for something else. So unless you have feelings about the transportation master plan, but should I go ahead and do the public meeting, and then will we renotice it if we continue this, or are we literally just continuing this and then it's up to us if we want to?
So you can continue the public hearing as well.
Okay.
So you could have the next meeting also.
How would the public notice for this?
Ask Ryan.
Ryan, how would the public notice for this meeting, considering the amount of roads this will impact and amount of citizens living around it?
I'll let Jason answer that because it was his staff that noticed it. So I'm not sure entirely.
It's on the state website, and are the 3 places that we're required to notice it in the city. So we don't notice every household. That's really expensive to do. So we do it on the general boards. One is required by the state to post it on their website, which we do. And that's where the main
1 out
notice.
of 3, right?
And then the city's website, and then there's physical locations within the city center that we notice as well, library as well.
Has anybody did an impact study and how much outreach will that get? Like, that's just, I mean, the state's website is good luck. And the city's website, who's going to think about it to know what's coming up? And then the boards here, the amount of public citizens that walk in the city in comparison to the amount of the people. And we know our city has a really weird number. 16,000 people showed up for the mayoral vote out of 90, over how many eligible to vote. So I don't see that outreach. I mean, I know it's the mandatory, but it seems like the mandatory requirement are so lax, it's almost to not have people show up.
Well, we do follow the state requirements. We do follow our city ordinance. So I mean, that's basically, if we go out, just for an example, the PF zone that this council just approved last night, we did 2 separate notices, one for planning commission, one for city council, and we sent it citywide. So 26,000 notices. It was about 10 to 12,000 each. So to do that on a regular basis is just impractical for the city.
It's cost prohibitive. I get that part of it. But truly,
could we expand to the Facebook page and other mechanisms?
And we do,
because I think more people actually look at that than the city website.
So we do. Pete Wolfley in our city has hired 4. I don't know if they're full-time or part-time, but they're actually going to do more outreach and focused on Facebook, focused on taking pictures of events and being a part of that. So to get the word out more abundantly that way. And so that's something that's about 2 weeks ago, they started doing that. So you're going to see a lot more outreach and other ways to get the word out of different projects. And Facebook is one of them, and other options as well. So that's we could use that platform going forward as well. But we do our best to notice it, but to do a citywide is just really impractical unless it's for a specific purpose.
I can
Cheryl?
reach more people on my Instagram in the city than the city can.
We also have it on the city calendar, and attached to that is the planning commission agenda and packet. So people, and we tell people all the time, you can go there and look at anything coming up on the agenda. So anybody who's interested in anything, not just this, but anything, they can go and see that on that. in that.
There's no doubt you're not
Thank
doing
you.
it intentionally,
Yeah.
not to get people there for
And
sure.
there's
Just
been
the
several-
requirements are too lax, that's all.
And there's been several meetings at the council. We've on a couple different study sessions at the council. We've had one at the planning commission. So if people want to be involved and are part of the public process, they'll know about it. But
normally
those
the
that
same
don't
people.
are not going to necessarily know about it.
Okay.
Oh, thank you so much.
I think some people don't want to be involved, but they don't want to be impacted either.
That's the-
Well,
And
that's
so
the
they'll
problem.
show up if it's going to impact them.
Yeah.
It's just making sure they know that it's going to impact.
Well, and I think it's
Right.
interesting that we haven't gotten any emails on this one. Is that correct? Nothing's been sent. And so I just,
And to Sam's point, and I don't want to beat it up, but to Sam's point, when we get to that point, whether let's say, 8th East or whatever, I mean, it's a long process. It's a lot of, at that point, 16th North, I was part of that before we
Yep.
gave it to UDOT. I mean, we had meetings, we had open houses at the senior center where we talked to, I would say, several hundred people.
Yeah,
Because
we actually, for that one, we hand delivered to make sure everyone was aware of that meeting.
So-
I understand that, but by that time, the language used is this has been adopted and approved by the planning commission and the
Well,
city
it's-
council.
it-
Please
it-
come in and check what we did for you
it's in a
as
plan.
citizen, as public servants. So it's a different conversation when it goes there than the one we're having now.
Well, it's a plan, in the plan, but the 16th North would not necessarily have done if everybody on the street was opposed, right?
I'm not,
So just because it's
Let's
in the
not go through that
plan,
now, but
I
let's
think
not
I'm
go there now.
repeating and,
it's not, let's not. Let's not go
yeah,
there.
it's not a done deal. So I think what Sam's point is, and I think it's accurate, is that just because it's in the plan doesn't mean it's going to be built.
And we get that, Sam. Thank you. We really do. And we appreciate everything you do. This has been, I'm sure, a lot of long time and work and not sure how it's going to pan out. But I appreciate you.
so in terms of the public meeting, I'm in favor of continuing this. How do other people feel about that?
Yeah.
Do I have to make a specific
agree.
motion to continue the public meeting?
When is your next meeting that they could go to?
I'd suggest not picking a date.
No, I mean for the Transportation
Oh, yeah.
Advisory Commission.
Tuesday night at 5:30.
And then, yeah, continue without a date, correct? Sorry.
I'd love to be there.
But I guess we could organize a regular meeting. I would assume that you could attend that meeting and be part of that.
The meeting for TAC.
TAC, yes.
Yeah.
As long as they were prepared to show us visuals and to kind of walk us through this, we wouldn't want to just crash their meeting. We would want to see visuals and deeper explanation of these
And I'm
things.
not going to speak for Sam, but I'm assuming that would be the agenda item.
Right. We'll have an agenda. We'll post it. It'll just be, I mean, I can take suggestions, but I'm thinking the planning commission is going to attend and we want to discuss the update to the transportation master plan. I would like to actually work with a few of you to find out what exactly you want us to do, and we can make sure that we're answering those, because we have our presentation. We have the actual TMP itself. We can open it up and go through it page by page. I mean, if there's, do you want to specifically talk about mass transit? We want to talk about, it seems to me like some of the appendices, like the TIS, the traffic impact study requirements and guidelines, you guys are probably comfortable with those. You're comfortable with the traffic calming toolbox and the processes with those. We're mainly going to be looking at levels of service, to Murray's point, connectivity, and we're going to be looking at some of the other plans that we have in there. Is that a general, am I anything else I'm missing?
That sounds to me like a lot of what we've
It's
covered.
education for sure.
Yeah, but I think getting in, like for me, getting into the plan is kind of where I feel like we've gone over the presentation. We get the general idea. Let's get to the specifics of what's in here and evaluate that.
Okay. Perfect. So that's going to be in a short amount of time. So I'll let the TAC know so they can study and be prepared. And I would ask the same thing. And literally, I would hope if you guys need transportation master plans, hard copies, some of you have them, some of you don't, we'll get those to you. And I would fully expect them to come in with sticky notes and highlights, and let's go through it.
You're speaking my language.
And we can get food if we need to. Because everyone's going to function better when they're not hungry.
Sam will make the meeting 4 hours to 8 hours if you need it to.
Yeah.
We have to cut off by 11 PM.
So Sam, can we send out an invitation to the planning commission on their calendars or emails?
Yeah.
If you have specific things like that, I know we listed some, but it'd be nice to prepare specifically what you're interested in. You know, we have it in the document, but we can go a little bit deeper if there's specific items that wasn't listed here, if you think of anything.
I think we can start circulating emails and include you on them with some of the things. We would love for you to be as ready as possible. We don't want anything to come out of left field.
Yeah, because it'd be nice to use all that time pretty efficiently. Because I mean, I know you guys think it's boring. We think it's boring too.
I don't know, man. We're talking about this is odds games. I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So did you want to say something?
I'm just getting ready in case you had a question about the motion.
Yeah. Well, we just want to make
Thank
sure
you.
we want to continue it. We need to say that we're going to continue the public hearing as part of the motion to continue.
Continue the public hearing as part of the motion. Continue it without date, though. That's appropriate.
Okay. Okay. Is that where we're ready to? Okay. Can I? Yeah. So I can continue it without having the public hearing because this is the first time we've done it this way. So, okay. Anyone like to make a motion or is it up to me?
No,
Okay.
I move that we continue the transportation master plan update meeting and public hearing to some future.
To a future date.
To a future date.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. Helena?
Aye.
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 Right. Thank you. Item 4.1, meeting minute approval from our last meeting.
Make the motion to approve the minutes from May 3rd, 2023 meeting.
And I second.
Okay. Mike?
Aye.
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 Brian, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I apologize. I wasn't in the start of our work session. Had to take care of some other pressing matters, but I didn't realize we didn't introduce you to Gary McGann, our new assistant city attorney. Is that correct, Gary? Is that the correct title?
I think so.
Gary comes to us with Uber experience. I'll let Gary introduce himself and maybe share his experience with you, but he will be working with the Planning Commission going forward and with land development type law. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a total blank, Gary.
Land use.
He's the attorney. Land use.
Land use.
Thank you. So I'll let Gary introduce himself.
It's great to be here. Thank you for giving me just a moment. My name is Gary McGann. I live in Provo, just barely south of the Orem border. I can probably throw a rock and hit Orem. And my background is I grew up in Orem. Went to Sarah Park, Lake Ridge Junior High. I can remember Old Lincoln High. I can remember Spencer Elementary and lived in that area long before the mall, and have been an attorney for nearly 30 years. Worked for Provo for about 25 years, legal department, and actually for about 20 years ran their community development department, dealing with all of these types of issues that every community faces. And so the struggles and the trying to balance all of the competing interests are things that everybody deals with. And it's great to be here and to be a part of Orem. Orem's got a great reputation around the state, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And so I'm available for if there's a question or a concern, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
We feel very lucky to have landed Gary, and we're very excited to have him. I'm very excited to learn from him as well with all his experience. So officially welcome, Gary, from Planning Commission.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. I think we're done. Have I missed anything? I think we're good. All right. You want to do it?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Helena?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned.
Everything, all